All right, we're recording.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Michelle Stricker, work at the New Jersey State Library, Deputy State Librarian for Lifelong Learning, Continuing Education. So if you were with us last week, welcome back. And you just get us today rather than the entire State Library management staff and the state librarian. So it should be, it's a little bit of a shorter day today, which I'm sure you'll be happy about. And but we have 3 good programs lined up for you. I wanted to just take a couple of minutes to say that Bob prefers that all the Q&A, all your questions go in the chat, in the Q&A box, sorry. So reserve that chat just for, some back and forth, but questions all go in Q&A, and he'll be monitoring that, and I'll be taking a look at that too. So there's that. And I wanted to just give it a minute or so to ask you, did you have any follow-up from last week? Did you have any questions for us? We had, and not anything really that delves into the law, but we had Michael Cerrone last week who spoke on library law, and he also did a purchasing presentation for us. And then we called them the 2 Pats, Pat Tumulty and Pat Pavlak, who's the executive, or she's the president of NJLTA. Pat Tumulty is also doing consulting work now with the New Jersey Library Trustee Association. So they're going to be doing some things together around the state, or rather online, until we're able to get back in person again. So if anyone had any questions for us, please put it in the chat box. This is technically supposed to be new directors training, but instead what we did this year was we opened it up to new and experienced directors. Probably going to find that last week we had a lot more experienced directors involved, because everybody needs a refresher on library law. So I think probably more of the experienced directors probably joined us there. But the training, we do this every year, usually during the month of February. This year it didn't get canceled because we normally hold it at the state library, and depending on the weather, sometimes we had to reschedule. But it's always a 2-day training. We've tried kind of narrowing it down into 1, and it just doesn't work. There's just too many basics that we definitely want to get through. There's usually, we have topics that we feel are important for new directors. So you're not going to find anything that's, like I would say, like a really fun, exciting presentation. It's really all nuts and bolts of being a new director or a director, and that we feel that you're going to need. So we usually have about 5 to 6 presentations spread over the 2-day period. We've asked a number of our presenters back over the years because they do a great job for us. And I don't think that there's any questions in the Q&A, although if you think of any that have to do with last week as they come along, feel free to pop them in there. We can address them later. So I think what I'm going to do is introduce our first speaker. I ask him back every year. That's Chris Carbone, who is the executive director, East Brunswick Public Library, South Brunswick, sorry, North Jersey, all the Brunswicks, it all runs together to me. I'm a South Jersey girl, so sorry, Chris. We do appreciate him coming back and presenting for us every year. He's going to be doing a presentation on budgeting, and I always ask Chris back because I think that he does a very clear job of laying out sort of basic budgeting, especially for the first time or new library director, to make it very clear for you. So what I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Chris and remind you again to put any questions in the Q&A. And Chris, thanks for joining us this morning. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to let you get started.
All right, good morning. Thank you, Bob and Michelle. It's great to be back, and I'm going to just share my screen here. So let me see. Okay, so you're all saying that, yes? Okay, sorry. All right, good morning, everyone. It is good to be back. And as Michelle said, I'm Chris Carbone. I'm the director of the South Brunswick Public Library. I think I have a little bit of an unusual background in public libraries because my undergrad is in business administration. So that's not a typical course of study for people who end up in the library field. And I feel that it has really helped prepare me as I've moved into administration in terms of dealing with numbers and budgeting and management. And I will try and make budgets and financial reporting as fun and exciting as I can. But off we go. As Michelle said, this is more geared towards someone who might be starting out in this area. I see a lot of wonderful and great experienced directors with us today. So feel free to chime in. I'm sure you all have information you can share and provide as well. But my goal is just to try and give everybody a basic background, some tips and pointers of how to think of things and approach things, and just to let you know that you're not alone out there, that there are places that you can go to get help when you have questions. So a lot of you may not feel like you are a numbers person, and I'm here to say, but yes, you are. So, sorry. All of us take all sorts of statistics and counts in our daily work at libraries, from circulation stats. I'm sure you'll recognize a whole bunch of really common call numbers there in the middle. Even doing counting story times and teaching little kids about numbers, we work with numbers all of the time. So when you look at budgets and finances, try and just think of them as regular numbers that you're used to. There's really not a lot of high-level math. It's mostly adding and subtracting, maybe some multiplying. And when you have budgets and accounts, you might want to organize them like you would classify your collection. Your accounts may have account numbers, and if you just think of those as the call numbers for your funds, you can relate it to all of the work you've had throughout your career. So in terms of budgeting, there is what I call the continuous financial cycle. And you could be at any point at this right now in this year, but generally you would plan for and prepare for next year's budget. And then throughout the year and the cycle, you would monitor your spending through monthly financial reports and make sure you're doing a check on a regular basis of how you're doing, how your funds are going in and out. At the end of the year, you would want to do an evaluation and make sure you have an annual audit. And in the middle between all of that, you might have some special projects going on which have either a separate allocation or a separate budget that you're on top of and that you're planning for. So this is constantly going on, and at any point in the year, you're going to be somewhere in this, or you might even be in multiple places in this, because they do overlap quite a bit. If you are a new director, you may start your job at any point in this cycle. My suggestions too would be to find out what past practice has been at your library, and simple ways to do this is to review prior year budgets and audit reports to get a baseline and understanding for the numbers, the trends, and any recommendations that have been discussed by your board. I would ask your trustee treasurer and or bookkeeper, if you have one, to explain how your library or how your town and county handle things. Because in talking to people, I find that just about every town and library does things a little differently. You want to review financial discussions or actions that were in your board minutes to see how things have been approached and what philosophies are out there. It also reviews strategic and facility plans. Hopefully they're available, and definitely introduce yourself to your town or county's CFO. My other suggestion is that if it's not broken, I would not rush to fix it right away, because there could be unintended consequences for changes that you make. So until you have a really good understanding of your situation, or at least, even if you've been there a while, take a thorough analysis of things and look at cause and effect of what might happen if you change things. I wouldn't rush into changing things too quickly. It's really important that you understand who holds your money. Some municipalities, and I apologize, a lot of this is geared towards municipal libraries. Counties run a little differently, but I will try and speak to those as best I can. But some municipalities pay the bills for their library. They hold on to all the funds. Now, the towns must fund their municipal library at 1/3 of a mil or more. Your board, not you, should ask the town for an accounting of what has been spent each month. And your board should approve all bills each month. And how that process works, again, could be a unique thing that has evolved between the relationship between your library and your town. But you want to make sure you understand what that relationship is. If it needs tweaking, you know, try and develop personal relationships so that you can bring up those suggestions and kind of get people on board to improve things. If your library pays its own bills, which means that you have the money in your bank account and you're writing out your own checks, then the town collects those funds through their tax payments. They must make a payment to the library quarterly at minimum, either quarterly or all of the third of a mil by March 31st. And that's even if they haven't yet passed their budget. So it's important that you know that, and hopefully that's just happening automatically and you don't have to go to bat to fight for that. But the town has to provide you those funds on a regular basis, and that is all spelled out in the New Jersey statutes. It's also important that you understand the payment process that happens when you have invoices. And again, this can be very different if you pay your own invoices or if your municipality pays them. You want to know how purchase orders are used in your town. There are all kinds of purchasing laws, and I believe someone else is speaking on purchasing. But again, sometimes the implementation and the way it works is a little different from place to place. There are special purchasing exceptions or a little lax rules for library materials and things that are different than your town. So it's important that they may understand that and so on. But also know that if they are paying your bills, then you may be forced to use some of their stricter rules and guidelines because their payments they are making are going through their municipal audit. So it can confuse things a little bit or just make things a little bit more hectic. Also be aware of the turnaround time and how that impacts your available funds versus the actual funds or cash that you have on hand. For example, in my library, my town holds on to the funds. My library board approves the invoices, but that means the invoices has to go to a monthly board meeting at the library, and then we send them to the town, and then they don't cut checks until they have a council meeting where they've approved expenditures of their own. So it could take 6 to 8 weeks to get a bill paid from the time I get it and it goes through those meetings. It just depends on how it hits the meetings. So you want to be aware of the timeline and the process and how it works in your town. Now, what is the budgeting process? And here's just some basic recommendations. And first, what is a budget? Just some basic definitions here. It's an amount of money available for spending based on a plan used to decide the amount of money that can be spent and how, or an official statement from a government about how much it plans to spend. So the key word here is plan. A budget is a plan, and if nothing else, we've learned in the past year that the best laid plans can mean nothing when something happens that is unexpected. But the goal is to have a plan, but also know that you may have to tweak your plan, you may have to make sudden changes, so you want to have flexibility and good understanding of each part of that plan so that you can best see where impacts may happen and where you may have some wiggle room to move things around if you need to. In terms of the budgeting timeline, libraries can have different fiscal years. The most common ones are a calendar year starting January 1st to December 31st, or like a state fiscal year, which starts July 1st. Different libraries use different timelines for adopting a budget. There's no one right way. New Jersey is a little odd where a lot of times budgets are adopted and you're already 3 or 4 months into the year. So you're kind of guessing on your spending in the beginning. Common practice is to go off a quarter of the previous year's budget for the first quarter until your budget is settled. That leaves room for a lot of uncertainty and changes that could happen. So you want to make sure you've got your ear to the ground and kind of know what may be coming down the pike, if there's any cuts or anything, so that you're not overspending in that early part of the year until your budget is finalized. Make things easier on yourself is my suggestion. Follow the past practice for your library during your first year as a director, or maybe your first year in a new library, and try and experience that full cycle if you can, so that you get a good understanding of all the parts and pieces and the process, and also all the personalities that are involved. Also, for the budgeting process, you want to establish financial goals for the fiscal year. You want to gather information, differentiate between your needs and your wants, determine special projects costs, and develop this plan. And remember to involve your staff where appropriate, and your process should absolutely include a trustee input. Establishing your financial goals for the year. Will salary increases be given? Do you want to increase material spending? And also in materials, in what formats? Do you want or need to reduce certain expenses? Should some funds be set aside for capital plans? These are all overarching goals that are going to guide your beginning steps as you look at the funds available and how you can divide them and try and meet what you're trying to achieve. Remember to be realistic in your goal setting, and there are benchmarks and comparable data out there for both other New Jersey libraries and libraries nationwide if you want to get a sense of what's typical or common. You want to gather information about your anticipated income. How much income do you expect to receive that you have to work with? If you're a municipal library, the $1/3 fund amount to be generated by your town's library tax is announced in early October. This is done by the state library, puts it out, makes it easily available for us to find. It will be right on their website, and they generally send out an email telling us when it goes up. You may have income that comes from fines and fees. Hopefully you may have some savings and generate a little bit of interest from that, although right now interest rates are pretty terrible. You may have gifts that are either pledged or anticipated, or at least a projection of what's common. And you may have some other sources of income. So again, this is where looking through past records, you'll get a better sense of what you might expect. And I would say if it's your first year, to be on the conservative side. It's always better to be conservative and end up with more than you were expecting than to budget for more money than you actually take in, and then you have a problem towards the end of the year. Also, I want you to be aware of somewhat recent legislation now that permits municipal libraries to seek an increase in their library tax funding by going to the voters to do a direct referendum. That can only be done, I believe, in November during regular elections. It is a pretty lengthy process. We've had our first library to do that was successful. That was the Mawa Library. It's not the right situation for everyone. It may not work in every town, but it is something that it may be a possibility in the long run as a goal or an objective. You need to know about your fixed and known expenses, and these are your needs, the things that you have to pay. These are such as your salary, payroll taxes, pension costs, health benefits, professional development. I put that in there as something important. All of those things maintain and develop your staff, which is going to be the bulk of your expenses. In libraries, it's common for that to be even up to 85% of your budget. That's what your staff does, the work and provides the service. Without them, it's just a big building full of books. Some of these expenses are handled differently in different towns. So that's another thing that you want to know and be aware of. Some towns will bill you the pension costs. Some towns will pay it for you. Some will put it in your $1/3, some won't. Same with benefits. Those are the things you want to find out and just see how it works where you are. There may be chargebacks from your town. They are legally allowed to charge you for things like snow removal, payroll if they run your payroll, and things like that. If they don't charge you anything, great. I would never bring it up with them. If they do charge you, then make sure that you feel they're charging you a fair market rate. And if they aren't, I would start to, get some questions. Maybe your board can start asking, and it would be good to try and negotiate a shared service type agreement so that it's known exactly what the fees would be and what's expected by whom. You're also going to have service contracts for things like your HVAC system. You may have cleaners that come in, your auditors, alarm, fire monitoring, whatever. So you want to, go through whatever documents you can find, go through past expenses, figure out what those contracts are. Hopefully some of your staff can help you with that. But those are things that you'll have to support in your budget, as well as your utility expenses. If you're part of a consortium or have any kind of shared service expenses, your telecom and internet and other things. So these are the things that you have to pay in order to run your building and operate and serve the public. Now, how do you estimate these numbers? I talked about that a little bit, looking at your past financial reports and audits. Look at a year or two if you can. Now, this past year has been a little crazy. It's not really the norm, so I wouldn't focus too much on spending in 2020. but maybe look at 2019 to 2018. You know, what are the trends? Has spending increased or decreased in certain areas? Has it stayed the same? If you're in any multi-year contracts, such as for HVAC maintenance, you want to find out what the cost is going to be for the current year, because it typically goes up each year, or also find out if there's contracts that are expiring and you need to renegotiate them. You should ask vendors for estimates. Yes, negotiate and ask for discounts. Don't be shy. I have an employee who is just great at that. And it can't hurt to ask. The worst they can do is say no. Also keep your ears open. We're information professionals, so you should be able to find lots of sources for things. Especially if your major expenses are gas and energy costs expected to rise. If you pay pension costs or PERS payments, what is the increase that is being anticipated or hasn't been announced yet by the state? What are the expected benefit costs? If you get those from your municipality, make sure you're talking to them to find out. And, for benefit costs and things like that, that your town may pay for you, if they bill you, try and get copies of the bills, try and verify that you're being billed the actual cost, so that there's an understanding and that it's not just some arbitrary number that they're taking out of your budget. You also want to review all your variable costs. These are the things you want, such as library materials, which is really important, but you need the building open and the staff here first. Also programming that you may offer, technology updates, which eventually will become urgent, but on a given year to year, they're more of a nice thing to do. And just regular library and office supplies and other things that you may come across in your situation. You also may have special projects that you wish to do. Examples are, installing or updating self-checkout stations, or, you should have a computer replacement plan so that all the computers in the building have a certain lifespan and you're planning to replace those on a regular basis. If you want to start a new special collection or a new service, you may not be able to afford to do everything right now, but it's good to have a wish list. Grants or unanticipated gifts may become available, and you want to be ready to take advantage of them and have a few ideas or suggestions for someone like a donor or so on of things that they might be able to support, and you're ready to hit the ground running. So you've collected all this information, all of your thoughts and plans and your goals and your aspirations, and you want to put them together in a proposed budget. You want to group your budget lines into the same categories as you report them in the annual per capita state aid report. So if you're not familiar with that, I suggest reviewing old reports, because it's also going to give you a summary of how spending has happened in previous years. You'll see the different categories that they group the expenses in. And if you set your budget up that way, it makes that report much easier to do in the long run. Your goal obviously is that your anticipated income should balance with your anticipated expenses or exceed your anticipated expenses. If your expenses are higher than your income, then you need to reduce your expenses, which is always the hard part. If you have more income than expenses, then consider yourself lucky. Review that wish list that you put together. Consider creating or adding to a restricted capital fund for building maintenance or improvements, or other things that you might need to do. You may have really a need for more staff or so on. But what I would suggest is, as you look at that, unless you can predict a long range trend, don't tie yourself into an ongoing commitment. You may have extra money one year, but unless you know you're going to have it in the next year and the next year and the next year, staff is not the first thing you should do unless you at least look at it as a temporary thing. Depending on your situation, you may be required to present your budget to definitely your board and also possibly publicly to your town council and mayor. I would provide all of them with a copy of your budget or proposed budget, but not your entire budget calculation worksheet. That's just too much information. It's going to derail the whole conversation. It's going to make people go off on tangents and questions. You want to give them just the key budget lines and what they are for, but have all that supporting information and documentation available with you so that you can refer to it to answer questions. Be prepared to explain how you came up with your numbers, It's okay to say, you know, I don't have that exact data with me. Can I get back to you? And then follow through and make sure you get back to them. And you can always, or should always, be able to ask for help from your treasurer and or your finance committee of your board prior to the presentation. They can and should help you prepare, and they may even help with the presentation, depending on what the norm is in your town. In terms of monthly financial reports, and forgive me, I know I'm going really fast, and because I'm sharing my screen, I don't see any questions coming in, but I'm assuming we'll take questions at the end. It's just a lot to cram in an hour, so I'm just gonna go ahead full steam. But monthly financial reports, these are some useful monthly reports, and your auditor may guide you on the kind of reports they're looking for. But basically you would have an expenditures to date, which is just basically what you've spent up to this date and time versus what you've budgeted, also known as a budget control report. Very typical is just a profit and loss statement that looks at the income you've taken in and the expenses you've had and what's left over. And then the bill list that you should be sending to your monthly board meetings for them to approve. So an expenses to date versus budget, typically it would be done monthly. You also may have one that's a year to date, which shows, you know, if you're in November, it'd be everything from January 1st through November, and it would compare against your budget. This example is just a standard QuickBooks report. If you have QuickBooks, that's great. It's relatively simple to learn. There's lots of also resources out there to learn more about it. If you use it, it's great if you are familiar with it or someone on your staff is familiar with it, if they do the bookkeeping. If your town does all of your money and finances expenditures, then I'm sure they have some kind of reporting that they would provide to you. In my town, as I said, my town pays all of our purchase orders and invoices, but it takes up to 2 months for the bill. By the time we get the bill in the mail, process it, approve it, send it to the board meeting, send it to the town, it could be a while. So what we need to know is that that money is already, it's no longer available, even though they haven't written the check yet. And if I get a report from their finance system, it's not going to show that money expended yet because it's still in this ongoing lengthy process. So what we've done is we've just set up our own set of spreadsheets where we track all of the account numbers that the town uses. And so our spreadsheets are more up to date than theirs because as soon as we get the invoice, we enter it in here as if it's been paid. And we know that that funding is no longer available. We opened with purchase orders, but some of them we're allowed to draw down. So we may have a large purchase order for Baker and Taylor that we use over and over again until it's gone. Your town may or may not operate that way. So it's important that we track those purchase orders and what we've already spent and what's no longer available. So we have our own sort of set of books. It's almost like having 2 sets of books, but it gives us more up-to-date information. So that's just another way to do it. This could also be put into QuickBooks as well. We just started this way back before we had QuickBooks, and that's how we do this right now. And then a profit and loss statement, as I said, is just a list of all of your income for the month in whatever categories that you collect things, such as fines, or if it's your regular library funding, donations, if you charge for printouts, things like that. And then your expenses, and then at the bottom, you know, it'll show you if you're on the profit side or the loss side. This again is just a standard QuickBooks report that you can easily run if you're using that. And then a bill list, which could be done in all sorts of formats. This one is, it's almost like a check register, again, from QuickBooks. You could do this in an Excel spreadsheet. You could even do this in Word if that's all you have. But you should send a list every month to your board of all of the checks that are being written and for approval, or all of any invoices that you're sending to the town for them to pay. All right. You may have a capital budget. Capital budget is for larger projects with a longer anticipated lifetime. It allows you to plan for big projects like a roof, carpeting, HVAC, an ILS system. It's a plan for multiple years, and you want to establish a schedule based on the needs and likelihood of it actually happening. I would consider setting aside some operating funds towards future capital expenses if possible. I know a lot of budgets are really tight. That might not be possible, but even if you could squirrel away, $1,000 a year or something, if you don't need it, it'll add up a little bit here and there. And then when you have an expense, at least you've got something to start with. If you are reserving things for a capital project, they should be reserved with a board resolution restricting the funds for that purpose. And you may need to request capital funds from your town or county. If you have a roof that needs to be replaced, that's most likely not something that you're going to be able to save up for many libraries. Or you may have an HVAC unit that just goes and needs to be replaced immediately at an emergency level. Also, do be aware of potential state funding. While the first round of New Jersey construction bond grants are out, there will be a second round announced soon. So if you are looking at potential projects, I would familiarize yourself with that process. And there's a grant source there that you might be able to get some funding from. The audit process, this is something that municipal libraries must be audited every year. There's no mandated time frame, but it's a good idea to get it done within the first 6 months of the new year at least. If you are paying for your audit, even if it's the same auditor as the town, you should request a proposal that includes the cost of the audit and what the services will be included. You can negotiate with auditors just as you would with any other vendors. They charge wildly different amounts for the same basic product. I would ask around, see what other libraries are paying, and people can recommend them. And it's always a good idea to try and change your auditor every couple of years so that you have a fresh pair of eyes looking over things and making suggestions and so on. Preparing for the audit, you should ask for help from your treasurer and or bookkeeper in preparing for it. If you've been organized all year, it really shouldn't be that challenging. You just are going to end up giving them a box of stuff, and they may have some questions that you'll go over with them. But there's certain things that you will need, including all your bank statements, your bill lists, your board minutes, all the checks you've written or check registers, deposit records, your payroll records. One easy way to look at this is even just to have a file for each month of the year. And as you get these items each month, just put them in there. That's what we do. And then when the auditors come, we literally just hand them the 12 folders and our board book that lists all the documents that went to the board and all the board minutes. And they pretty much are on their own. So if you keep it organized, it should be a relatively simple process. Then once you get an audit report, you need to decipher that. What does it mean? You can ask the auditor to sit down with you and your treasurer to review the audit, especially if this is something new to you. Remember, you're their paying customer, and that review should be part of the product that you were billed for. If they have any recommendations for change, do ask questions. Typically at the end of the audit report, there's a page or two for their findings, their suggestions, any concerns they have. Ideally, your auditor would send you a draft audit to review first, because they may have suggestions or something simply because of a miscommunication or a misunderstanding. So if you could review them with them before they give the final audit, that will be great for everyone. So do ask questions. Also, ask how many other public libraries do they audit, and of those, how many have the recommended procedures in place, because libraries do operate a little bit differently than other businesses and so on. So you want to make sure they have at least an understanding of how you operate, and if they're making recommendations, is it really feasible in the way we do things? Okay, so just wrapping it up, when in doubt, my overall theme is ask questions. Do you still have questions? I'm sure you do. You should always be able to contact your auditor anytime throughout the year, or your accountant if you have one. You can contact the state library for guidance as well. You can network through places like the New Jersey Library Association. They have the administrative and management section where you can connect with other library administrators throughout the state. You're not alone. We're all doing these things. In terms of additional resources, just things to be aware of, there's the return of funds law. This is what they consider excess funds. I don't think any library could ever have excess funds. There's always things that we can do in a given year or coming down the pike that we should be saving for. But this law was passed in 2010. If you have savings that equal, I believe it's 20% of your operating budget, if it's above 20%, then you may be required to fund some of it back to the state. There is a form you should fill out each year. The state library oversees this. They can certainly help you with it. But if you are building up a balance, you either want to make sure it's restricted for a capital purpose, or if it gets too large, you may have to give some of it back. And again, for more information on that, contact the state library. For this particular year and last year, do be aware of potential CARES Act funding or any other COVID-related relief packages coming from the federal government or state government. There may be some expenses you've had for PPE and other challenges of this pandemic response that would be eligible for some reimbursement funds. A lot of times these things are being done through the town itself or through the county. So you may want to start by asking your CFO or your county commissioners of what they've been doing. And if you aren't already involved in this, but there's a chance that there's some eligible funding there. And this would again be for reimbursements of money you've already spent, but for unanticipated expenses due to COVID. Additional resources, the state mandated third of a mil municipal appropriation is posted each October. That again should be on the state library's website. New Jersey library laws, there's a great section on the state library's website. There's a link there, especially part 6 deals with purchasing and part 7 includes local fiscal affairs law. Dry and boring, but it's there if you need to refer to it. Other things, again, your CFO can be a great resource, but only if you ask for help. New Jersey laws governing municipal fiscal administration can be found at the Department of Community Affairs website. And information on the construction bond funding is on this page at the state library's website. And again, round 2 application process is not announced yet, but it's expected sometime maybe this spring. For benchmarks to find comparable data, IMLS has a search and compare tool where you can look up your own library and the data they've collected over the years from our annual reports. You can compare it to other libraries nearby in your area, similar size of population, of budget, and so on. You can also go to the state library's website and look at all the New Jersey Public Library data and compare, spending and staffing and so on with other libraries that have either a similar population or a similar budget size, just to see how others are operating. And that's everything that I have right now. So hopefully that was helpful. Again, it's kind of just a snapshot overview, some tips and tricks, hopefully just to get everybody to take a deep breath, realize you're not alone, realize we all work with numbers all the time. Don't let it stress you out, and know that there's people you can go to for help. So if you have any questions or comments, I will attempt to answer them. I don't claim to be an expert in any of this, but I hope it's been helpful. And I know that there's some really excellent experienced library directors with us today, and they may have even better answers.
Thanks a lot, Chris. So we have 2 questions so far, and I encourage people to put more questions in the Q&A section so we can pick Chris's brain. We have a question that asks, how often should an association library have an audit?
I would recommend every year, and I believe association libraries are eligible for per capita state aid.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So doesn't that, does
It
per
is.
capita state aid require an audit?
An audit is a requirement for state aid, that you have an audit each year. Just as an organization, I mean, an association library is a nonprofit organization, and any sort of thing like that should have an audit each year. You shouldn't let it go longer than that. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Next question. Any suggestions for when the CFO is not a library supporter?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole personalities thing, and it's a challenge. And, I would say I've been at my library a very long time, but you know, I didn't start as the director. I started part-time in the circulation department, and I've been fortunate to just move up in my career here. And when I became the director, the relationship with our town was very, very bad and very strained. And they were not library supporters, and there was just challenging with communications there. So the biggest thing I could recommend is really trying to open up communications, keeping them informed without being overly over the top or annoying. You know, just trying to develop relationships with them and maybe other people that are stakeholders and in power and have influence in town. It's sort of like, it's like who you know in some sense, or who you can get to be your friend. But the rules are the rules and the laws are the laws. And so as long as you're informed and you can, you know, very nicely present them with, you know, any issues that they may not be following properly. And you know, again, it all depends on the personalities, and you're going to know that better than I would. But if you can find a way to approach it that almost like you're trying to help them, or you just want to make sure like the town doesn't get in trouble or things like that, and you want to make their job easier, it is a challenge. But if you get enough supporters outside the CFO as best as you can, that will always help you as well. The loudest voices tend to get the funding.
I just want to add to that, because I was a director of a small library. It was an association library, as a matter of fact. But, you know, that's in a way, that's what your trustees are for too. So if you can get your trustees to talk with the CFO, and, you know, of course, you're going to give the trustees the information that says, you know, you have to turn the budget over, or the money over to us in quarterly payments, something like that. But be careful about putting yourself in the middle between the CFO, you know, because it is your job, you know, and I've talked to a lot of exasperated library directors and trustees. I've had to talk to a lot of CFOs that say, well, you know, how come, you know, I want that money and how come I can't have it, or what, you know, or tell the libraries what to do with it. But, you know, like Chris has said, you know, give them all the information that they can. But if you can get your trustees to do that, they are supposed to protect you. You know, this is your job. And oftentimes, sorry, my earpiece is coming out. Oftentimes, you know, it can be a tense situation, and you don't want the trustee, the CFO and the municipality thinking that, you know, you're the one that's causing the problem. You know, so you want to make sure that if you can get one or two trustees to do this for you, that's the most important thing that you could do. That they're supposed to be the buffer between you and all of this, because it is your job, and they can really make life difficult for you if they wanted to. So if possible, get the trustees to step up for you.
Yeah, Michelle's exactly right. She answered that way better than I did. And that's true. And with I'm fortunate, my trustee treasurer is willing to do that. And we almost play like good cop, bad cop. Like if there's the good news, then I tell the CFO. If they have a question or they want something, or they feel that he's not fast enough, then my treasurer will email him and reach out to him. Or at the very least, I'll say my treasurer is bothering me. He wants this, because then it puts it on the treasurer. And remember that your board members, they're residents, they're volunteers, they're taxpayers, they vote in that town. So they carry more weight than you might.
I also have, you know, you could also tell them to call Bob Wright at the state library, because again, you know, we're sort of that outside party, that third party. And I have talked to many CFOs. Bob, I'm guessing the same for you.
I love to hear bad news.
I know, me too. It's
great.
It is kind of fun, to tell you the truth, although sometimes I think I'm going to get a pair of cement shoes. But at any rate, you can have them call Bob Wright at the state library. We do like Chris says, we do like try to like say, well, you know, you wouldn't want to get in trouble, or, you know, you wouldn't want that to end up in the paper, but, you know, this is the way it is. And so we're happy to give them the bad news for you. And we get, like Bob said, we kind of get a kick out of it. But you know, a lot of the, in all honesty, a lot of the municipalities, you know, they really don't know library law. They just don't know. They don't know that that you're not a part of their budget in there. They don't know that you're not a part of the municipality. They think you're a department, and so they don't really understand. And so, no, I'm joking a little bit, but we take it in all seriousness. We're happy to step up and inform them too, if you want to give them the number and tell them to call us.
Yep, definitely. Okay, next question. Big philosophical question for the New Jersey State Library. So this is for you and I, Michelle. What if a township does not want the library to manage their own funds? Can they legally be forced to? No. Libraries are independent. I hope you have your library has its own attorney so that you can, if necessary, fight this, you know, in the courts if it gets to that. But the library is an independent entity. Its finances are independent. And there is no law that I know of that would allow a municipality to take over its library.
So this is another case where really, yes, they can be forced to do that.
What?
And you can have them call us, you know, for those laws. If you're having, if they just absolutely refuse, and they refuse after, you know, we would talk to them and just explain what the law is, and yes, they're going to have to get a lawyer, but pretty much, you know, you show them that law, and Chris had it up there about how often they have to turn over the funding to you. So there's nothing philosophical about it. It's right there in black and white, and they have to do it. And your trustees have to, you know, have enough guts to make them do it. So therein lies sometimes where the problem is. You know, the mayor appoints the trustees, and so that could be a little bit difficult. So you're going to have to try to get one or two trustees that are going to step up, but they may not keep that funding. I mean, that's just the law.
Yeah, they can hold on to it, as is the case with South Brunswick and Chris. Like he said, there can be an agreement between the library and the municipality to for the municipality to hold back the funding and pay out payroll and benefits and things like that, just for efficiency's sake. But if the library wants the money, they have to turn it over. They have to. It's in the statute. They have to turn it no fewer than quarterly payments on the third of the mill, and have to turn it over to the treasurer of the library. So.
And I'm sure Chris will tell you, Chris, your library agrees to let them hold the funding, right? I mean, that's an agreement. They just don't tell you we're going to be doing that. You have worked out an agreement with them, and it's up to your trustees in your library whether you're going to let them hold that money or not, and it works out to your benefit.
Right. It is an agreement, but interestingly, it started out of the same situation being asked about. So I had mentioned before that the relationship between my library and town was really bad at one point, and a lot of it was over poor communication about finances and budgeting, because at that time my library did have all the money and we did pay all of our own bills, and you know, I was not in administration at that time, but it became such a hot topic with a CFO and mayor and council that were questioning everything, and they just weren't getting the kind of answers they needed or wanted. So it became very public, it became very ugly, it was in the newspapers, and so they kind of demanded that they wanted to just take care of the money, and our board finally did agree just to end the nightmare. And I will say, like, over time, it's worked out really well in our situation. It does slow things down. You don't have quite as much immediate control over things. But our relationships are much better now, and we're able to work together, and it's good. But that may not be the case everywhere. So we had a lot of pressure. We were kind of forced. We could have said no, but it became such a political public battle that at the time they just agreed. And in the long run, it was the best situation for us.
Yep. All right, next question. We recently established a capital account with a capital plan. if we have additional funds that we want to put into the account, do we need to create a new plan each time?
I think Bob may be able to better answer that based on the state requirements for the give back law. But my thought is that you could just amend your plan with a resolution, or, you know, add a new amount to it. Should not be, or have a broad plan.
Yeah, I mean, a capital plan. I don't want to hit the tennis ball again, but Michelle is going to be talking about strategic planning and capital planning after this, and she would be probably best suited to answer that. Michelle, you're muted.
Yeah, so you don't have to write a new capital plan. That was a question, right? If you want to add funds.
Yeah, you need a new plan.
You just do a resolution to, you know, every year to add additional funding to your capital account. The thing is, the capital account, as you know, regarding the return of funds law is, you know, you have to really be. You're allowed to keep like 20% over your budget. Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, every year.
20% over your most recent audited operating expense.
Okay, so what happens is then if you want to save additional monies in a capital account, you have to designate what they're for. So 1 year you might say, all right, my roof is going to go in about a 5-year time period. So in 5 years, every year, we're going to put aside X amount of dollars. And so in your capital plan, you're outlining that. And also, we need to save for a new computer lab, and I'm going to put X amount of dollars in. So as long as your capital plan is transparent, and you're not just saying, I'm going to put money in a capital account, but I don't have anything to do with it. I'm just going to try to put it there so I don't have to return it. That's not going to be as defensible if it comes to return of funds law, and the municipality is looking at that money that you have in reserve. But if you have that money in the capital account for legitimate reasons, and you have estimates for the new roof, or estimates for the computer lab, or for the addition, or whatever it is, that's when, you know, that takes years to build up, and that's when your money can really be protected, that the town can't take it back. So you have the plan, you're allowed to amend the plan, you know, you can change it. You can say, well, I was saving up X amount of thousands of dollars for the computer lab, but you know what, my roof is just, or my HVAC totally went, and now I'm just going to need to use the money for that. And you just, as long as you're documenting that, you're fine. But you do need to document what you're saving for. You have to be saving for something. You just can't put it in a capital account with no plans for it. I think I got that right.
Correct. Yep. All right. Last question in the queue. Oh, second to last question. Just a new one pop in. You suggested to group budget lines into the same categories as a specific report. What was that report?
Yeah, that's your application for the annual application for the per capita state aid. And I know in the chat, Bob put in a link to a discussion that they did in January about that. And that report is due on March 15th. So it's hopefully something you're working with right now. And so if you're not familiar with it from the past, you'll be very familiar with it soon. But you report on that different expenses in different categories, such as operating and collections, and collections are broken down into print and non-print. And so if you want to make sure that throughout the year you're working with your funds in those types of categories, so at the end of the year when you have to report it all, it's very easy to just add them up, and it already is divided in the way you want it to be for that report.
Yep. Group it up so it matches the survey. It's the easiest way to do it. Last question. Is there a maximum amount for funds to be reserved in the capital account for a possible building construction?
Not that I'm aware of, as long as it meets your capital plan. You know, if you say you're building a 2,000 square foot addition, but you've saved $20 million, that's probably not going to jive. So it is, you know, I think you could save as much as you can, as long as it is, you know, to fund the plan that you are trying to achieve.
Yeah. the thing is, you don't want to make your capital account like a rainy day fund. You want all the money in there to match as closely as possible the projects you have in your capital plan. So like Chris says, you don't want to like raise a huge amount of money and the only thing you have is a very small project, because the capital funds are immune from the return of funds law. So if you have a bunch of money in your capital account and your municipality finds that out and looks at your financial documents, they could say, well, hey, you're taking that away from us. You're not allowing us to have that by keeping your capital account. There's no plan to match it. So we're going to take you to court and get that money.
So get estimates. You have to have estimates to back you up. They match.
That's reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to remind, we really didn't go into return of funds too much, but I do want to remind everyone out there that there was a process for this. There was an application on our website for it in case it happens.
It's in the library law section of our website.
And it behooves you to fill out the form every year, at least the budget form, which has like these auto-generated fields. What is it called? The
transfer calculation form.
Yeah. So have your treasurer do that and keep that on file, because if the municipality ever takes a look and says you have all this money, you can pull out that transfer budget form and say, we filled this out. This is the only official form that's going to tell you whether or not you have excess funds or not, and we do not. See here. And then also a reminder that the municipality cannot just take the funds, and decide that you have too many, or that, in your capital account, we want to take the fund, we're just going to take the money. They cannot do that. Only the state librarian can give permission to return funds. So there must be a letter from the state librarian that we've approved the packet to return the funds. So they just can't take it. You can remind them of that if that's happening, to you anymore. And the other thing is that we do notify when there is a packet, DLGS. So DLGS, yeah, but Department of Local Government Services, they're the ones that audit and oversee the municipality's budget. And we will notify them if municipality is just taking your funding from you, so that they are alerted. And so while maybe the state librarian doesn't have a lot of big Thor's hammer to bring down on the municipal government, they will listen to DLGS, and DLGS will contact them if we say, hey, this is going on. So so let us know if that is happening.
Yep. All right. Last question. If you have above the amount you're allowed to hold on to and don't currently have a capital plan, can you create one, or do you have to return the funds and then start one? Good question.
I'll tell you what I would do. I don't know if it's
okay. Shoot.
At my next board meeting, I would immediately pass a resolution restricting those funds for some capital purpose, like if you were doing a new roof in the future or something. And then, because the plan may take a little while, and then I would get a plan created as fast as possible. But because when you fill out that form that Michelle was just talking about, I believe you're supposed to include a copy of your plan if you have above 20%. So you need to get that plan created. I would not just return the funds unless someone made you. And as Michelle said, only the state librarian can approve that. So, but Michelle can better answer that, or maybe she's doing that later today.
No, not at all. I'm not going to be doing that. The capital plan. I'm going to talk about strategic planning, which is something that if you want to return the funds, you also have to have. So there is, if you get into return of funds and you take a look at that packet and you say, this is just like, I'm going to go nuts because there's so much work to do. Know that it's there to protect you from just letting the municipality, take those funds back. That's why we ask that you have a strategic plan, a capital plan, these different things in place. It's because if you do, then the state library can come in and say to the municipality, you may not have those funds, you may not take them, you have to give them back, whatever. So in the end, and once you have your strategic plan in place, and we will be talking about that, but in the capital plan, you'll find it may be hard creating it, but if you upkeep it, it's just, sort of, part of the business of running the library, and it won't be so difficult as it is, or time consuming as creating it from scratch. And there was one more thing I wanted to say about, and so a lot of the municipalities can take a look at, all that extra money and think that they're going to get that back by taking it. But they, in reality, in the law, what it says is it must be returned to the taxpayer. So
taxpayer relief, correct.
Taxpayer relief. So they just can't put that money back into their coffers. They actually have to return it for taxpayer relief. So, that's another thing that you could bring up if they're kind of eyeballing a fund that you have.
Yep. All right. Technically, we have until what 10:15. So there is one
Any more question? Okay.
Yeah, there's one more question that came in, and that says or asks: is the board allowed to give bonuses to staff? My board does not want to give more than 2.5% salary raise, but would like to give a one-time bonus to the staff.
I personally believe they are. The board is empowered to set the salaries, and they could just say, this is your salary for this year, and next year it'll be different. It depends, if they're going to do it as a one-time check, or if they're going to just add it in, throughout the rest of the year, a little bit each payroll. In my library, we actually have some small bonuses that is negotiated into our union contract that are given at the end of the year. So I know, we do that, and it seems to be legal and okay. We've done it forever, but it's part of our contract. Whatever they give is still subject to taxes and I believe also pension payments, because it's coming through a payroll, but I'm not an expert on that, so I'm not entirely sure about the pension.
So I'm sharing my screen. Can everybody see this powers of the board? Can everybody see that? Yes. So library shall hold in trust and manage all property, may rent rooms when proper, construct buildings, blah, blah, blah. May hire librarians and other necessary personnel and fix their compensation. So yes, they can, as Chris said, they can either give a % salary raise, they can give a bonus, they can, basically they set the salaries. I would be careful of lowering the salaries because you might have people leaving your library, but they can, they handle the funds of the library, and it says in the statute that they can fix their compensation. Doesn't give any other caveats for that or anything like that. So there you go.
Any more questions, Bob?
No, I'm trying to figure out how to, where did my,
Any last thoughts, Chris, that you want to say before?
No, just thanks for having me back. I hope it was helpful, and I look forward to seeing everyone live again someday.
Yeah, Chris, thank you so much for coming back, and we really appreciate it. Always like the presentation. I think it's a very, very clear layout and explanation, and thanks for doing this for us every year. I almost like, come January, I'm eager to get the email from me about, or December about new directors, and I really do appreciate your coming on with us this morning and putting on the effort into the presentation, answering all the questions. So yes, we hope to see you soon. Stay safe and healthy.
Thank you.
And thank you again.
Yep.
Take care.
It's my pleasure, and I think the presentation will be sent out or something, right? So
Yes.
I'm recording it. We'll put it up on YouTube. These files, as I learned last week, are gigantic and take forever to render and upload. So it might not be until tomorrow before it actually gets up there. But I'll try my best.
Okay, my email's on there, so if anyone does have a question that you think of, feel free to email me and I'll do my best to answer it.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Chris. Take care. Good luck with the
See you later.
puppy.
Yep.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
All
Bye-bye.
right, bye-bye. So we have about 10 after, and I'm going to be up next for strategic planning. So why don't we try to meet back here at, do you want to do 10 or 15 minutes, Bob? What do you think? 10 minutes is
Well,
enough? Or
The schedule says 10:25.
all right,
and,
so why don't we
give
meet
us
back
15
at,
minutes.
okay, we'll meet back here at 10:25. And so everybody go get your second cup of coffee or whatever it is you drink in the morning. So,
For the recording.
all right, here we go, everyone. So I'm up today, Michelle Stricker, and I'm going to be talking about strategic planning when you can't afford a consultant. So welcome to the presentation. It's a popular topic here in New Jersey because we recommend, the New Jersey State Library recommends that you have a strategic plan. It's not required, but I think it's strongly advised that you have one, especially given the conversation we had a few minutes ago about if you have to do a return of funds, it's definitely going to be required for that. So here are some of the things I want to go over today and what I hope you get out of the presentation. I want to encourage you, strategic plan is also called a long range plan. So I may switch back and forth as we go through the presentation between the two names. But what I wanted to do was just give you like a simple format, of the strategic planning process. And that's going to be including delegation of tasks, what the directors, what you need to do, what your library trustees need to do. I'm going to review all the basic elements that are in every strategic plan, and that includes the vision statement, a mission statement, community analysis, goals and objectives, or I like to call them strategies. Yeah, budgets, timelines, and evaluations, and promotion of the plan. And then, you're going to have plenty of resources at the end, along with you have my email and, well, don't use my phone number because I'm not in the office. We've been working from home. So although my email does pick up my phone messages and will forward them along to me, but email is definitely preferable. So strategic planning is really recommended for every library, big and small. And really, there's no need to fear it. I know a lot of the smaller libraries, especially just, think that this is just going to eat up all of their time and they don't want to do it. But I want to tell you and encourage you that it's definitely doable, especially when you break it down into smaller chunks. So let's see, can I go to the next slide? My slide is not advancing here, and it was just advancing a minute ago. There we go. Okay, so why does your library need a strategic plan? Because as Yogi Berra says, if you don't know where you're going to end up someplace else. And so now's a good time to tell you about my obsession with Yogi Berra, New Jersey native, lived up in Montclair, passed away in 2015. But I'm sure you've all heard of him. He was the baseball catcher, manager, and coach. He played 18 seasons with the New York Yankees. I don't know a darn thing about baseball, but I do know all of his what they're called yogi-isms. And these are like his cheerful double takes on teachings that are, they're witty and they're profound. And I bet you're familiar with a lot of them, and you're going to see them. The entire presentation has, has all of his, a lot of his quotes in there. So Yogi's been called like the Zenist master of them all. And he is able to state the truth in a hilarious manner. So I thought that these were particularly apropos for the strategic planning process. I can't hear you all laughing, but I hope you're all hysterical on the other end when you do read them. But I wanted you to know why you're going to see Yogi Berra in every single slide. So libraries cannot keep on doing what they've always done and expect to survive, let alone flourish. Strategic planning begins with a hard look at the present, and then it includes a study of future trends that lead to a discussion of ways your library will address these challenges. As you create the plan, you're going to get an overall picture of your library, its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and ongoing projects and services. A lot of time that's called SWOT. You're also going to be able to look at your community to see who they are. You want to know who's using your library, and more importantly, who doesn't use the library? What needs do they have that aren't being fulfilled? And that's the most important part. And yes, it takes a lot of work and research and organization, especially when you can't afford a consultant. And I would say it would take a good 3 to 4 months to finish on your own. And you don't want to let it go longer than that. You don't want to be working on your plan for like a year because, then you're going to have to start all over again. And you really don't want to do that. So you want to make a commitment that you're going to do the planning and you want to do it and you want to get it done. It's a great opportunity for you to look ahead for solutions to your long-range needs and expectations. And you can think of strategic planning as a management tool that you're going to use to chart and shape the library's future. It gets your head out of the weeds and it gets you to see the big picture and work towards that. It lets you be proactive rather than reactive and in a panic all the time, trying to latch on to all the new trends that seem to come out daily these days. I have to do this, I have to do that. It's sort of, you get distracted with everything. Strategic planning is going to keep you on the straight ahead. Not to say that you're not going to deviate for something big that happens, but pretty much, like I said, it's going to keep you on the road to success. So let's tear apart the basic elements of a strategic plan. These are going to be things that are going to be in every strategic plan. And it's hard to know where to begin. So I think the best thing to start with is the organization and the delegation of tasks. And these are the list of tasks that generally the library director needs to do. So I'm going to assume that you're going to be the lead organizer here because I think that's true in the majority of cases. So as the director, you're going to be educating your trustees about the planning process. You're going to help them and help your team formulate the strategic planning process. You're going to decide who that team is, first of all. It's not going to include everybody in your organization. You're going to help conduct the research. You're going to provide examples of successful strategic plans because, there's no one template of a successful strategic plan. If you're a larger organization or larger library, naturally your strategic plan is going to be, pretty big. But if you're a very small library, then, it doesn't have to be that long. So you can search online for samples that you may like the format. You are going to collaborate and actually draft the plan. You're going to suggest to your committee and your trustees the action items that you want to do to achieve the goals that are in the plan. And you're going to manage the library, to support the plan. I mentioned right off the bat, that's no intended, but you're going to have to appoint a planning committee. And that planning committee needs to include the director, the trustees, some selected staff, maybe the head of your friends group, and a few community members. And, not the community members that are already using the library all the time. Somebody that you might get to know that is not coming in all the time. They may be a gatekeeper to another type of community within your town that you don't have access to. And Nate, just let me stop here and just give a qualifier and say that if you do have any funding at all, I would recommend hiring a facilitator for the plan, because a facilitator really has more of an objective viewpoint, and they are always going to keep you on task and keep things running smoothly. And so, they do range in, all kind of price ranges. And I know for smaller libraries, sometimes it's very hard to come up with $10,000, $15,000, $25,000, that's needed for a plan for a small to mid-sized library. So I'll just say that if you can put aside some funding for that, that would be great to do, but it is really not necessary. The whole point of this was to tell you and break down the plan so that you could do it yourself. So I told you what the director had to do in the last slide. Now I want to tell you what your library trustees or board of directors, what do they have to do? So they need to establish how work on the plan is going to get done. They have to serve on the information and gathering committee with you. They need to support community involvement. They may know some people that they would like to have become involved or be on the team that's going to be writing this strategic plan. They help determine the goals, objectives, and priorities, and they collaborate with you to actually draft or write the plan. And you report to them, and they regularly evaluate the process towards the completion of goals. So it's really on the trustees to do the strategic planning. At least that's what we tell everybody. However, in all honesty, they're going to look to you as the library director to gather the information and to put it all together. So we do have at the State Library, we do have lots of strategic planning resources on our website to share with you. They include presentations, and there are some templates there and best practices. Please don't think you have to reinvent the wheel, steal it from somebody else, and then plug in your information if you like the format. And everything is free and readily available for you to use. So there is, you see on your market set planning, the Ivy Group has done a great job. There's several presentations. They are sample format for strategic plans. There's ones for small and medium-sized libraries and facilitating community conversations. So as your committee is ready to begin to formulate a strategic plan, I want to remind you of one thing, and always keep this forefront in your mind. It's not your library. It's theirs. The library is a community anchor, an essential service, and as such, it belongs to the community. Your job is to engage the community and make your library reflect your community, and every community is different. Strategic planning reminds you whom you serve and what different demographic groups and interest groups there are in your community. And there are many that you've never even thought of, I'm sure. So what needs do they have that your library could fulfill? Because this is the most important part of strategic planning, it's the field research. You have to do the field research, meaning that you have to get out of the office, you have to get out of the building. Of course, all of this, is pre-pandemic. We know the difficulty of doing this now, so please, bear that in mind when I talk here. And the results of the research that you do out in the community is going to force you to ask some tough questions, meaning, what are we doing as a library, and why are we doing it? For whom? Is it really what the community wants? Is not what I think the community wants? Is it really what they need? Is what we're doing sustainable? Should we do something different in the future? So all of these are going to lead you back to really having a library that is for the people in your community, and that's the statement that needs to be forefront in your mind. It's not your library, it's theirs. So I mentioned already that I'm not going to give you a format, a strategic planning format or template today. You can find so many samples online or on our website. There's any number of books that you can get through ALA. There's other programs and formats you can get at Web Junction. So select the format that you like the best and what you think is going to work best for your library, or you could deviate and totally create your own. But every strategic plan is going to have the following elements. So if you create your own document from scratch, it's got to have these elements: the vision statement, the mission statement, the analysis of the community section, your goals and your strategies laid out by year, a budget, timeline and benchmarks for you to track your progress through the plan, and then finally, a final evaluation of the plan. How did you do? How did it go when it comes time to write a new plan? And I'm going to be breaking these down in the next slides. A strategic plan helps clarify your library's vision and mission, and it gives you the tools and instruments to actually put your plans into action. You write it down, you plan it out, and then you're better able to put your plans into action. So where do you start? Putting pen to paper. And I always suggest that you start with a vision and mission statement for your library. So first, tackle your vision statement. Your vision statement focuses on what your library will be, say, in the next decade. It sets out like a long-term target or targets. It's supposed to invigorate, it's supposed to be challenging, and it's focused on what the customers need. So our vision is to be the community's best source for inspiration, knowledge, and ideas. And I really ought to check Long Hill again and make sure that they still have the same vision statement. But I think you get the general idea. And need I say, keep it short and readable. No one wants to read an entire page or even a really, really long paragraph for that matter, no matter how visionary you think it is. So start with your vision statement, and then you move on to your mission statement. And I think it helps that, what I want to do here is clarify the difference between the two. So the mission statement is really your purpose statement. It's your reason for existing. It sort of lays out whom you serve, what you're trying to accomplish, what roles do you play in the lives of the customers and in your community, and who you are as a library, what you do, and where are you headed. And again, keep it short. We link people to the world, transforming lives, enriching neighborhoods, and preserving history. We are the People's University, the center of learning for a diverse and inclusive community. Short, to the point. People, again, like I said, tend to get confused between the vision and the mission statement. So I hope I gave you a little bit of clarification here between the two. Vision statement focuses on what your library is going to be long-term in the next decade. Your mission statement is your purpose statement. So next we come to, this is a dense slide with a lot of text on it, but next we come to what's really the most important part of a strategic plan. And it's going to be the part you're going to want to skip, but you cannot, because it's not a real strategic plan without this information gathering and analysis from your community. You have to find out who is not using your library and why. What do they need that you're not providing? And this is where you're going to need to seek people for your focus groups who don't use the library. There are going to be the community gatekeepers, seniors, maybe the differently abled, the homebound. You're going to have folks in ethnic pockets or neighborhoods. And, you know, these are the people you're going to have to seek out and ask questions of. You need for community research, you can ask things like, you know, why do you live in this town? And what do you do in your free time? Where do you go? What kind of support do you need? You know, do they need help with their kids getting with college applications? Do they need technical skills? So this translates into solutions that you can come up with for these people to come into your library. And that's why the community search is so important. You can refer again to our website for resources on how to make contacts out in the community. And there are a variety also of targeted scripts for including different demographic groups in your planning process. You can also use a step-by-step guide from ALA called Turning Outward to Your Community, and that was developed by the Harwood Institute for Public Information. One I also like is by the Aspen Institute. It's called Rising to the Challenge, Re-Envisioning Public Libraries. I think that one is, this book is particularly clear. It's well written. I think it's good for smaller libraries, and it has an action guide included. So both of these are free to download, and I have links to them at the end of the presentation. There are a number of different methods you can use to gather information. You know, and again, remember in the age of COVID, we can't do community forums that's listed there, but, you know, you could do mail surveys and online surveys and phone surveys. And, you know, you could target these surveys by seniors or, you know, ethnic and professionals, teens, you know, whoever, and anyone you think who's in your community. And then the one part I did not talk about is that, you know, it's really important to do a staff survey too. You're going to have a few of your staff that are going to be on your strategic planning committee, but you want to make sure that you get all your staff input too, because they're just as important, and they have a vital role to play in, you know, executing all the plans that come out of the document that you're working on right now. And you want to know, you know, what are they happy about? What are they not happy about? What do they think? Where do they think there can be improvements? They often they're a good source because the staff often actually lives in town, so they know a lot of people, and they can help you out with maybe getting to communities that you might not have thought of. They may be part of those communities and know the gatekeepers for those communities. So they're going to be a really good, resource for you. And the results of all your surveys are what guides your strategic plan and justifies why you want to move forward with a particular goal. You just didn't, you know, pull it out of thin air. You have a reason why you formulated this goal. The research really forces you to identify trends, analyze the community, and you may have never done this before, or may have been done so long ago that your community or your town has completely changed over the last 10, 20, 30 years. So that's why it's important to have you do it again as you're working on the new strategic plan. And I'll just point out again that I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but the focus groups down at the bottom of the website. So there's information on, you know, how to organize them, how to recruit people to be on them. There's sample scripts down there for the different categories that you see. So you can just download those and use them if you want, or change them in any way you want to reach your community. And again, that's on the New Jersey State Library website. So goals and strategies. A lot of people call strategies objectives. Once you have collected and then analyzed your research and data from the community, you can begin to write up your goals and your strategies. And, that's another set of terms like mission, vision statement, goals and strategies, can often be confusing. So here's the difference. Goals are the general statements about the library's directions and aspirations. Select goals that may be achieved in a reasonable length of time, or that serve as interim steps along the way. And then strategies are, for me, I like that word better, but these would really be objectives. That's the how of moving towards the goals. Strategies are steps to reach your overarching goals. They set a framework for the activities of the library is undertaking, and they should be relatively short range, practical, and accompanied by the evaluation process. So keep it simple. If you're a small library with a small staff, 3 to 5 goals are plenty for you to have in a strategic plan. I mean, I've literally seen strategic plans where the goals go on for pages and pages and pages. And I mean, quite frankly, that induces like a real panic attack when somebody, sees something like that. So, rather see you have 3 to 5 goals that are truly researched, thought out, achievable, sustainable, than having all these goals, thrown in there where you just don't have a prayer that you're going to get them done in the time frame of the strategic plan. So don't overarch or overreach with all of that. Now, every strategic plan has to have a realistic budget to cover the costs of the things that you want to do, whether it's programming, a new tech lab, a building addition, a new HVAC. You include in there hiring a new librarian, a children's librarian, or a combination of all of these things. You're going to need to plan out the budget and how you're going to pay for those things you established that you needed in your goals. So if you have all these goals, but you don't have a budget plan, it's not going to do you any good. You have to make sure that your budget and your anticipated costs and the way that you save up in capital planning, you have to make sure that that jives with your goals. Make sure that you have the money, you know where you're going to get the money, how you're going to fundraise, and your budget needs to be sort of spread out over the life of the strategic plan. So you're not going to be able to say, we talked a little bit about this when Chris was doing his budgeting piece just a little while ago, but you're not going to be able to say, I'm going to do everything in the first year of my strategic plan if it's a 3 to 5 year plan. No, you need to spread that budget out realistically, and you need to spread your goals out realistically so that you're going to be able to achieve them. You can't dump everything right up front and do it in the first year. And to help you stay on track, you're going to establish your timeline and your benchmarks all along the way to make sure that you're achieving what you want to achieve and what you've outlined in the plan. So most plans these days are for 3 years, and that's primarily due to the rapidly changing technology and environment. Now, if you feel this is not enough time for you, we used to say you could stretch it out to, 5 years, but, that's it. A lot can happen in 5 years. Look what happened in the last year. I mean, that just threw everything out of whack. So really, we're going to say that 3 years is really ideal for a strategic plan. And, when you set this timeline, now you can systematically work to achieve your goals. And that's why you need, that timeline that's going to check your progress along the way. And your benchmarks are going to allow you to readjust or get back on track if you've gotten knocked off, if you have to. You do need to review the plan regularly, and you need to check it against the decisions and strategies you've made towards your goals and expenditures. And you want to make sure that you're always on budget. Can't go off budget, can't get ahead of yourself if you don't have the money to do it. So as the director, the library director, you need to be reviewing the plan on a monthly basis. Meet with the planning committee and review the plan status every 3 months, I would say, with the planning committee and with your trustees. And at the end of the year, do a 1-page progress report. Now, this doesn't have to be anything that's too in-depth, but if you do a 1-pager, it just lets you know, and it lets everyone know where you stand. Everyone on the planning committee, your staff, your trustees. Just tells you after 1 year we're here, after year 2 we're here, and after year 3, here we're done. Now, you can of course have longer range capital goals, like building a new library, and this planning would be mentioned in your strategic plan, but would require its own capital plan. So we know that you can't save up the money for a new library in 3 years. Okay, so you are going to have a separate capital plan for, say, much longer projects. And I one library I knew saved for 20 years to put on a children's edition. So that's how long it took. They had their strategic plan and capital planning for that, and they just kept systematically putting money aside so that when they finally reached their goal, they were then able to implement a new strategic plan that included the new building along with a new capital plan. So the final review, it ain't over till it's over. And what I mean by the final review is when you're finally finished writing the strategic plan, and it's not 3 years out when you're making conclusions and you're ready to begin a new plan. So before the final review of the plan that you just finished writing, say, what you need to do is put it away for a week or so and don't look at it. After working on this document, say for 2, 3, 4 months, it's easy that you get so close to that plan that you miss some obvious flaws before you're ready to roll it out. So after a week or so, take it back out and then ask yourself, did you create the plan you intended to create? You want to make sure that all your goals and strategies align with your vision statement and support the mission that you've outlined for your library. If there are any outliers, modify or delete them. You want all your energy focused on reaching your vision. Is your plan realistic? Can you do it? Make sure that all the elements in your plan support each other. Over planning is a very common problem, as I mentioned. So consider pushing some deadlines out further than you originally anticipated. Remember, you can't do everything in year 1. And then, is the plan complete? Identify any holes in your plan or potential activities that are unsupported. And is it clear and easy to follow? Remove, like all jargon that nobody knows what it is. Librarians are great at that. But is it easy to write down an action item or a goal that makes sense? Well, in the moment, it's easy to write them down to make sense in the moment, but making sure that that action makes sense in 6 months from now is going to be the crucial part. Make sure you monitor and check your progress along the way. The plan is an action document, and it's not meant to sit on the shelf. So, as we said, Are goals and objectives realistic? Are they being achieved? You know, are they still realistic a year or two from now? If you're not, you know, making, you know, milestones according to the timelines you specified, you know, why not? That's important to note. Why did we fall short? Why are we not achieving this goal? Should our deadlines for the completion be changed? Do you have adequate resources? Did something happen to your money? You know, did, you know, look what happened this year, you know, where the towns weren't taking in enough money. If you were over $1/3 you possibly got cut back. But, you know, something happened that would not allow you to achieve these goals. Did you not have the resources? And should your priorities be changed to put more focus on, you know, say one goal over another so that you could achieve the one that you deem is going to be more important? Strategic plan is really a living document, and you can make changes to it as long as you provide justification. And I'm gonna talk more on that in a couple slides. But you know, think of it as a living document that that can be changed as you move along if you have a good reason. So it's really a judgment call as to how often you review and monitor your plan. But is there some extraordinary or rapid change coming from inside and outside the library, like the pandemic? If that happens, then, you know, monitor it monthly. The director should be doing this anyway, monitoring it monthly and doing some updates. But I think that that's the best thing I could say. And, you know, if something happens, you want to make sure that you're reviewing it every month. And your board of directors or trustees should be seeing the status updates no less than quarterly. So you'll want to combine them into a quarterly report for your entire board meeting. Remember, all your trustees may not be on the strategic planning committee. So forget everything I said about following your plan. Just forget everything I said. You have to plan for disruptions like the pandemic, like funding challenges and grant opportunities, and the next big thing that we didn't see coming. So I don't really mean forget everything I said, but I want to talk to you a little bit about what adaptive planning is. You know, I mentioned in the last slide that your plan is a living, breathing document, and that it has to be adaptive to take advantage of opportunities that come along. You know, or you may need to regroup as we did during the pandemic. So in that case, it's okay to deviate from your strategic plan. The plan's only a guideline, and it's not a strict roadmap that must be followed, okay? If you deviate from the plan, though, be sure some mechanism is identified for changing the plan if necessary. So, for example, regarding changes, you want to write down what's causing the change to be made, what were the disruptions, what happened, why they were made, and you know the why is different than what is causing the change. And the changes are made to include the goals, the objectives, responsibilities, and timelines. So if you're making the change, it's got to go through all of those different parts of the strategic plan. And a good recommendation here is to make sure that you keep old copies of your plan as you update it throughout year 1, 2, or 3 if something happens. So you could always refer back to it for reference and see what you changed. Last but not least, you know, promote your plan. It's a transparent process, strategic planning. You want everyone to see exactly what your library is doing to keep up with community need. And so that's why you have to promote your plan when you're finished. You want to show everybody your deep depth of services, as Yogi says. Rarely, when a plan is completed, do organizations actually acknowledge the success they have achieved. have the trustee show off the plan to elected officials, service groups, the school board, PTOs, and anyone else you can think of, and highlight its potential for the community. People are going to respond favorably when they see a library project is planned to improve their services. And so celebrate your successes along the way. We're so focused on progress, and problem solving, and we're eager to move on to the next version of the plan or the next goal, but celebration is, important, as important as accomplishing objectives, maybe even more. Without a sense of closure, acknowledgement, and fulfillment of a job well done, the next planning cycle becomes a grind. So be sure to celebrate your successes along the way. So this brings me to the end, but I want to just quickly summarize that, today I've given you sort of an overview of strategic planning that may be done without a paid consultant. We talked about the role of the director in organizing the strategic planning committee and the role of the board of trustees in the planning process. We've reviewed all the parts of strategic plan, including the vision statement, the mission statement, the goals and strategies, and the importance of information gathering and of doing community analysis. We also reviewed timelines and benchmarks and talked about the importance of the budget and the need for an evaluation of the plan. And finally, I've given you a list of some free resources on the New Jersey State Library website, but here's a few more that I talked about earlier about the Aspen Institute and the Harwood Institute that are, really excellent. And so I'm here to answer any questions now. I'm going to let Bob, I'll turn my video back on and answer any questions. And, just I want to thank you, as Yogi did, for making this day necessary. So let me start my video again.
Yep, there you go.
And
so, you did really, really well. You only have one question.
oh, yeah.
If you are redoing your strategic plan every 3 years, do you need to change your vision and or mission statement each time?
No, I don't think that you do. I think, I think it needs to be evaluated to see if you're, still on track. So, your vision and mission statement can stay the same. It can be tweaked if things are different. I think the main thing that needs to be changed or updated or, the community analysis. And that is going out into the, out in the community and finding out who's there and has it changed. And also your goals and your objectives or your strategies. What did you finish? What are you going to work on now?
Yep. Yeah, you definitely want to redo the community engagement portion each time you do it.
Yeah.
Because your community may change.
And, as we did say, for return of funds, you're going to need to have a strategic plan if you're going to submit an application for that. And as Bob and I talked about, in the last presentation, everybody should be filling out the one, what was the document, Bob, that had the
transfer calculation form?
Yes, that one form to make sure that either you do or you don't have to return funds. And if you do need to return funds, you're going to need to have a strategic plan. And one of the things that also happens is if you find your municipality is eyeing any extra funds you have, because let's face it, they're all in, financial shortfalls these days. We understand that. We each understand what's going on in our community and the problems that they're having. So if if they're going to look to the library to take some funding, they're going to kind of want it right away, and they don't understand that there's a process. So if all of a sudden you have to tell them, okay, well, let's review if I have to return these funds, I need to do a strategic plan. So that's going to be at least 3 or 4 months, and your municipality is looking for immediate relief. That's going to, really kind of cause some tension between the two of you. And, as I said, I have had to talk to several CFOs and explain that you're just going to have to give the library time. This is a necessary piece, of the return of funds application. But I don't want to just use this as an excuse for return of funds. I mean, it's just absolutely important to know where you're going and to have a plan. In fact, it's one of the main responsibilities of the Board of Trustees is strategic planning.
Long-term planning, correct. All right, one more question. Are there sample surveys on the State Library website? I think those are like the community engagement surveys.
Yes, there are sample surveys on our website. There are going to be a lot of samples in the, you see on the last slide, I think might still be up here for Harwood Institute and Aspen Institute. And you can also just Google the sample surveys, because a lot of nonprofit organizations have to do strategic plans. And while you're not necessarily a nonprofit organization, finding out what the community needs is sort of universal. So it's not just library specific. So you could, if you just, kind of Google that, you can find a lot of other templates too that you might want to take some questions from those and implement them into your own sample questions that you can find for your community analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So are there any other questions?
Nope, there are not. So Cynthia Cezak is here.
So we're going to take, I think, let's just take a 10-minute break this time. I don't have my, what time do you have, Bob?
I have 11:12.
All right, so at, let's just say 11:22, right? We're going to bring Cindy on to talk about managing library staff. So, and in the meantime, if you have any questions, you can still pop them in there and I can answer them quickly when we come back from the break, or when Cindy is done, or you could always email me. So everybody, thanks for your attention today. And hope you'll find this a good overall general reference on how to start your own strategic plan. Thanks.
Yep. All right. All right. We are recording again.
Okay, so okay, great. So welcome back, everyone. This is the last program, last but the best program, I want to say. So well, it's it's a topic that it becomes very difficult when you're a director, and that's going to be how you're going to manage your staff, especially when some problems arise. So Cindy, I want to thank Cynthia Cezak for coming on and doing this. She's a library consultant. She's supposed to be retired, but she's never stopped working since she left Patterson, the Patterson Public Library, as the director there for many years. And so she's currently acting director at the Parsippany Troy Hills Public Library. And so she's going to be doing this. We bring her back every year because even though she maybe doesn't want to do it so much all the time, because you're technically retired, but we won't let her get away from us because she does such an excellent job and has had so much experience in this area. So Cindy, thank you for coming back, and seriously, thank you for doing this.
You just want me to tell good stories. That's all it is.
I love good stories. I love to hear them. Yes, I do. And you do have some good ones. So I'm going to return this over to Cindy and let her get started with the presentation. At the end, we'll answer any of your questions and then just close out. If there's any straggler questions about any of the presentations that we've done, you're welcome to ask. So Cindy, thank you again, seriously, for doing this for us. It's a pleasure to have you. So turning it over to you.
Okay, hi everybody. I took a quick look at who is on the, who's attending today. And, a lot of you, I think, have been around before, but I hope you can get something out of this, or you can share your examples with me. As Michelle said, I'm currently a library consultant. I After I retired, I was interim executive director of Buckles for 11 months, all during the delivery crisis, for those of you who recall that. Some of you may be too new to recall that. Then I was at the Demers Public Library, and also Perinda is on a list here. So hi, Perinda. For a period of time, and I worked for NJLTA, and now I'm in the Parsippany Public Library as interim director while we wait for our new director, who I cannot name yet, to come in, and I'll hand the reins over. So my whole point is that I've had a lot of different kinds of experience. Before I was in Patterson, I was in Clifton for many years. And I will tell you that managing library staff is the most challenging part, but it's actually the part that I don't want to say enjoy the most, but I get the greatest benefit, personal benefit from when we're managing people and everybody is moving in the same direction. So advance the slide, please, Bob. And thank Bob for doing this, because like, it's just, I can't talk and do this. It's like walking and chewing gum at the same time. So, we all have this image of what managing a library staff might look like. Might have a group working collaboratively on a solution, respectfully listening to everybody, sharing ideas. Next slide, please. But sometimes it looks like this. Sometimes you have people who maybe it's bad communication, is it chaos, is it frustration? One doesn't really know. I got to figure out how to do this one. Next slide. So I'm just here to tell you, take a deep breath, abandon this approach. Although at times it's tempting to say, sort of like a parent might, because I said so, but it will not work. Somebody might accept it to your face, but behind your back, they are not accepting this approach. So let's go into something a little more fun. Next slide, please. So how did you become a library director? Now, if I were sitting here with a room full of you, I actually love doing this part in that I would go to everybody and say, how did it happen? How did you become a library director? And there were some great stories in the past, but obviously we can't do that in a virtual setting. I miss that, but we can't. It's just way too cumbersome. So I'm going to talk a little bit about your options. I mean, some of you may have planned on an administrative position from the beginning of your career. I only know 2 or 3 people that have said that to me. I mean, not that others haven't, but I only know 2 or 3 people who have said, yep, that's what I've wanted to do for my whole life. I only know 2 that graduated from library, in my personal experience, graduated from library school and became a library director without actually ever working in a professional librarian capacity in any other job. So that's pretty unusual. Sometimes you have extensive experience and you just wanted to take a position that paid more. Maybe you don't necessarily want the duties of a library assistant, but library director, but now you're like, well, I'd like to make a little more money. And the only position that makes more money in my organization or another organization is library director. Sometimes you were next in line. And that kind of happened with me. But I'm going to talk about that in a second. You think, this is the ideal, is that you think you can make a positive difference as a library. Somebody says, I've worked as a librarian, I've seen that as a library director, you can shape library services, you can motivate staff, you can connect with the community, that's what I want to do. So, do some soul searching and decide if that's you. Sometimes you're not really sure how it happened. Like sometimes people say, this wasn't my intention, I ended up here. What am I doing as a library director? And you do the best you can, but maybe it's not what your dream is. And I know people that have actually written themselves out. I know one individual who was a library director, and after she was doing it for a while, she was so unhappy as it, she actually went to her board and said, let's look for another library director. I'd rather take a demotion because I'm not happy at what we're doing and I don't think I'm doing a really good job. And I give her a lot of credit for soul searching and being honest about that. But frequently, it's a combination. Most people don't set it as a goal at the beginning of their career. Although, sometimes it seems like the next logical step, and you may have had a good or bad experience that motivated you to become the library director. Sometimes you're like, I've had such a terrible director and I will never do that. I know better. I will do a much better job. And I'm going to quickly tell you how I first became a library director in Clifton many, many years ago. I was a children's librarian for 10 years and had a director that was arrested for stealing book fines, believe it or not. And this was, you know, in the 80s, so it's a long time ago. And the board hired another director who was only there for 9 months. And it opened up the eyes, what she could do and how she could motivate us opened up the eyes of all of the librarians and all the staff. Is what a real library director could be. Because obviously this guy who was stealing fines, he wasn't so great anyway, in other ways. And then after 9 months, she left for a job that was actually more appropriate to her skill set. And we were devastated. I mean, I can't tell you how we were devastated. And so she took all the librarians after hours to one of the branches, and we had Chinese food together, and she gave us a little pep talk. And she said, I've worked with all of you. You guys are great. And one of you can step up into this. Who's going to do it? And one woman who just had a baby said, not me. And one woman said, I've never wanted to be an administrator. And one had been an intern. And I opened my fortune cookie and it said, you have the ability to lead others. And at that point, they all said, all right, Cindy, well, it has to be you. So that's how I became a library director. I had a fortune cookie tell me to do it. Go to the next, please. So being a library director brings a wide range of responsibilities, as we all know. And when you become a director, sometimes you have experience in one of them, but not all of them. So, you know, obviously fiscal management is a huge, and I know Chris talked earlier today, he's my hero. Even though I was library director for, you know, decades, I still don't feel I have a really good control. And I shouldn't say that out loud because somebody might hear it here. But I know when I don't know something and who I can go to ask. So you have to also, the responsibility for purchasing within legal guidelines is kind of overwhelming. And when you're a new director, it's a steep learning curve, in my opinion. Then, of course, you need planning expertise, like Michelle was speaking about earlier. Including in that, you have to maintain an awareness of the evolving trends in the profession. I think that, you know, involvement in professional associations is the natural way to do that, whether it's your consortia, whether it's a state library association, whether it's national, because you can't just do it sitting in your office. Community involvement, as I gained more experience, I became more and more involved in the community because, you know, way back when, that was not a major role for libraries, is to have community involvement. I know you can't believe it, but that's how old I am. And now it's so critical because, for example, right now I'm in Parsippany, and the community of Parsippany sees the library as an important role in the community, and they want to support it. Facilities management, oh my God. From day-to-day maintenance to renovation and new construction, some of you are embarking on that. They're going to be doing that here in the new Lake Hiawatha branch. Facilities management is constant and ongoing. I think that most public library directors, even if they have an assistant director who they frequently will delegate things like facilities management to, spend a fair amount of time between fiscal management and facilities management. And I've learned a lot over the years. Actually, one of my benefits is my sister's a civil engineer, so a lot of times I'll just call her up and say, so what should I be doing in this respect? But few humans, oh, and personnel management, by the way, which we're talking about today, few humans can excel in all of these areas. The job is a juggling act, and hopefully you can identify somebody to help in those areas where you're weakest. Sometimes it's staff members who are helpful or knowledgeable. Sometimes it's board members who bring a different area of knowledge that you don't have. I had a board one time when we were, and one of them was so fiscally aware. I mean, she was an accountant, but that, you know, she didn't let that hamper her. She had a very big picture approach to finances, and I learned so much from her. I also had, when we were building a new building in Clifton, I had a man on the board who was an engineer, and he could say, don't listen to that. We're not doing that. We're going to focus on this. And So he helped me bring it to the woman, by the way, who I was just talking to, who had been on my board. She gave me the wisest piece of advice I ever have, and that's got nothing to do with personnel management. I used to bring so much information to board meetings, pages and pages. And one day she sat me down and she said, "You write too much. Only give them bullet points. Don't give them all some information. Let's move ahead with our lives." So, you know, you have to go seek people who can help you. Next slide, please. So the key elements of successful personnel management are these: gaining respect, building trust, creating connections, and mentoring. And I'm going to talk all about each one of these separately. But as you know, or I'm assuming you know, the rule of thumb is you've got 1 year to set all expectations and set the course for future years. People expect a new director coming in to make changes. Everybody does. And after a period of time, they will be less willing to accept dramatic changes. So this is your chance to make big changes because everybody expects it to happen. But trust and respect are the cornerstones going forward. So you can't just go in and say, we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say. You have to gain respect and trust, and then you can make changes that people are going to be comfortable with and can begin to implement. Next slide, please. So gaining respect. One of the ways, just ignore that phone in the background because I don't know how to silence it. I haven't learned everything here. You have to deal with situations as they arise. And we'll talk a little bit more on interpersonal conflicts later. It is, I've made so many mistakes along the way with this, but I've learned that you have to deal with them as they arise because otherwise it just gets worse. You should spend some time on the front lines, and I don't mean necessarily checking things in or out, but at least ensure you're aware of what takes place there. You have to understand the workflow so that if people have some objections or concerns, you can address it in a reasonable manner. You have to treat all staff with respect, and you have to do your own job and do it well because you will be scrutinized. I had a staff member, when I went to Patterson, I don't feel bad saying this because it was a wreck. I mean, I can't even tell you. I don't know why I took that job. I needed a challenge. I was bored in Clifton. And there were only about 25 staff members for 50 positions. I mean, nobody had hired anybody. It was just crazy. They were not automated. And this was the year 2000. So it was just crazy. So anything, the good news about taking a position by the way, is anything you do is great. And I saw some names on here that I know that people are in situations in which they're taking on great challenges and they get a chance to really shine quickly. Almost anything you do is great. But I remember like moving some boxes in Patterson, like there were stuff piled up in one room and it was just troubling me. And I decided, you know, I don't feel like doing library director stuff. I'm going to start cleaning some stuff up. And one of the security guards said to me, "You are the hardest working director I've ever seen." And I realized it's just because I was physically working. Like that got respect from her, physically lifting boxes and moving stuff around. And I was like, I'm doing a lot of other stuff in the office, but if that's what you respect, I'm cool with that. You have to understand the duties and challenges of all staff, but you can't get in their way. And, you know, a lot of times I would go by, I like to wander by the circulation desk and just, you know, see what's going on, see the tenor of everything and the flow of work. And, but at one point when the Patterson staff would be one of the sort of like, just push me out of the way, like, let us handle that, you know, you can just stand over there. And that's cool. You know, I'm not going to object to that. The one advantage is that spending time elsewhere, walking around the building is many staff will ask you questions if you're in their location, but they're not going to come to your office to ask you a question. And sometimes it's a minor question. You could send out an email and you have to make it easy for them to approach you. Now, I'm not talking about ignoring any kind of organizational structure you have, but you have to realize that sometimes asking something directly of the person who makes the decisions is much more powerful to them than getting it through the chain of command. A lot of times if somebody has asked me a question, you know, if a security guard asked me a question, I would then share the fact with the supervisor that this question came up, just so they are aware. And also so they don't feel like I'm going behind their back, because nobody wants that. And you have to ensure that the staff sees you treating the public with respect, even if they're yelling at you. You have to show that. Well, now people have said to me, "Oh, you're so calm, Cindy, and you make us feel calm," and we're going. And I don't know how that evolved over the years. You know, I don't feel it inside, but I'm able to project that when I'm dealing with staff. Can you change that, Bob? Next slide. Building trust. So staff have to trust that you look out for their best interests and that you take their input seriously. Here, for example, Parsippany is open to the public certain hours, and we keep having discussions about changing pandemic protocol. Should we hold materials longer? Should we hold it? So I asked them, like, what are we comfortable with? Here's the data. Let's make a decision that you're all comfortable with, because I don't have to handle returned materials. I mean, I can, but I don't have to. So we have to make sure that they understand that their concerns and their input is seriously taken. And staff have to trust that you're going to back them up. And whether you're backing them up, excuse me, in internal conversations or with the public. And everybody thinks about dealing with, you know, difficult public members. It's also with other city departments. It's also with vendors. I mean, when you're backing staff up, it could be any of these things. And you have to give them the tools they need to do their work, whether they're resources, time, or a collaborative setting. A couple of examples that I mean in terms of backing up. And this is extreme. Hopefully none of you will ever encounter this. And I love to tell some extreme stories so that, people remember them. But we had a situation in Patterson in which a patron came in all the time and went to a certain area of the stacks every day and then came back out, and one of the staff members, witnessed him masturbating there. And we called the police, and rather than taking him away, the police just basically shook their finger at him and said, "Don't do that again." And then he left. And I was outraged. I was, as you all would be. So I went right down to the police department, and they took me right to internal affairs, and I filed my complaint. And it turned out that this individual was a registered sex offender who hadn't been reporting. So he was arrested. But the fact that, and the staff really valued the fact that I believed them and I challenged the authority of the police, not in a crazy way. I wasn't screaming. I was just internally outraged. They saw I was outraged. So I went through the process to make sure that they were safe. On the other hand, I had a situation in which there was a maintenance worker and a librarian having a relationship, and staff came to me because they objected to that. And I was like, as long as they're working, when they're working, I cannot object. I cannot tell them what they have to do in their own time. So I can't back you up in that. In essence, I'm backing them up. But you have to understand where you can draw that line. I give staff a lot of autonomy because I like autonomy. I like to be micromanaged. But if they squander that and they abuse that, I am more than happy to remind them of what they've squandered. Like the next time that they say, no, I can do it. I'm like, I don't know. You haven't proved yourself last time, although I'm known for giving second and third chances, but I like to remind them of the fact that they've abused them. Next slide, please, Bob. When creating connections, I'm not talking about community connections. I'm talking about connections with your staff. You have to connect it with them on an ongoing basis. Now, I know many of you are in small libraries and you're like, I see everybody all the time. Great, fantastic. Some people have a little larger situation. but I talked about the importance of getting out and walking around and, you know, knowing what everybody's doing. Ask about their work and ask about their weekend. And I'm not talking about getting really familiar with people. I think you just have to understand, you have to acknowledge the fact that these are humans. And one of the things, you know, it's obviously part of the emotional quotient that we're talking about. So you have to remember the frailties and foibles of staff. I had a staff member who worked in the office in Patterson, and she's still there, and I would say this to her face, and we're great friends, but she is one tough cookie. And she felt that I was too easy on everybody, and she would give me a little talking to. You're too soft on these people. You have to be harder. I'm like, you know what? I've done this for this many years. It's worked so far. I'm too old to change. This is the way it is, you know? And then she would say, oh, and then leave the room and just accept it. I mean, this was just took place between me and her. But I think that you have to understand that sometimes there's things going outside happening in people's lives that affect their performance. You can't always give them the benefit of the doubt, but you have to have a sense of, I mean, we've all have staff members, for example, who've had close family members who pass away. That affects you. That affects you very deeply, and it affects your work. And at some point you have to like give them a little leeway until that happens. And obviously I'm way too emotional about staff members and trying to factor a way to get them to motivate it. But I think that what happens is that once people are able to recoup their selves, then they can go back to what the full job that they were doing. And you have to pay attention to different styles of communication and modify your style to theirs. They don't have to modify to you. I mean, unless they're emotionally aware enough to do that, you have to modify to them, unfortunately. And some staff members jump right in. That's me. It comes out of my mouth before it goes to my brain. I share what I think. And I to teach myself to like pull back and let other people have space to speak. But I've had staff members who never speak in a meeting, will come up to me right after the meeting to share their ideas. And there I am wishing that they would share these in a meeting, but that's not who they are. I've supervised people who I really was in the process of disciplining. I mean, I really can't share this, obviously, because some of these people are still employed in libraries that I worked with. But they did something that was so heinous that they were being disciplined for this. And I realized that if I have a meeting with them, they are not going to respond to me directly. That I actually have to email them concerns and questions in advance so that when we come into the meeting, they are prepared, emotionally prepared to address the issues. Because otherwise it's a pointless meeting. I'm speaking, they're not speaking, nothing gets resolved. But it took me, a long, long time to realize that not everybody is, as talkative as you, Cindy, and therefore they're just going to say whatever they think. Some people want direct answers from you, and some want context. And you have to be attuned to how that happens. And then also you have to develop an understanding of staff relationships within your organization. And I'm talking about with each other. And I'm not just talking about chain of command of table of organization. I am talking about who's friends with whom and who goes back, and you have to know who your gossips are. And every organization has them. We all have somebody gossiping. And the gossips, keep them close. When I worked in Clifton, I was obviously based at the main library, and the branch was about 3.5 miles away. It's a sizable branch. And the key gossip in the organization was working at the branch. And I managed to sort of manipulate her, and I admit it was manipulation, to come work at the main library because I wanted to keep her close to me so that I would feed information to her and then she could feed it out to the staff. So that was the informal way of sharing information by me speaking directly to her. But sometimes you have to address the gossips directly on. I mean, one time I was in Patterson, and on the lower level, if anybody's been in Patterson, is most of the security guards are there because the public restrooms are there. And I had said something in a meeting, and I came down the hall from the children's room, and they were all there talking, and I could hear she, knowing they're meaning me. And so I finally walked to them and said, I'm right here. Just ask me directly. Oh, no, we weren't talking about you. Then we finally had a productive conversation after the gossiping, after the confrontation, and after a conversation. Next, please, Bob. Hello, Bob. Mentoring. I consider this a critical part of personnel management. I'm going to pay it forward. You give staff the tools they need to move ahead in their careers. Build healthy relationships with staff to allow them to progress, and think of mentoring as your responsibility to the profession. I can't even count. I should have started, but I can't even count how many librarians have worked for me briefly and then moved on. Some of them are on this program, by the way. And there are different reasons. You know, the particular library wasn't for them, the commute was too far, the money wasn't enough, whatever. Nearly all of them left with warm feelings on both sides. I can think of one that didn't, but that's, you know, a story for another day. I'm very dedicated to this profession, which is why I don't seem to be able to retire, I guess. And so I don't harbor any hard feelings. If somebody comes to me and says, I'm moving on, I really don't. I did have somebody come in who announced it by bringing me a bottle of wine. So I don't know if that was, you know, what that was about, but I have a really good sense of when somebody's about to resign, when they come and say, can I talk to you for a minute? And I'm like, oh, not again. But at any rate, next one, please. Top compliments for a successful library manager: that you encourage growth, that you provide autonomy, that you look out for staff, that you respect everyone's contribution, that you lead by example, that you communicate and listen, and that you provide leadership and vision. Simple, right? You want people engaged, so let them try things. One of my primary examples was a long time ago in Patterson. I had been talking with at a staff meeting about, you know, some of the innovative programs different libraries have tried. And this was a long time ago. And I talked about a touch-a-truck, and many of you know what a touch-a-truck is. You bring in snow plows and you bring in ambulances, and kids get to, and the fire trucks, and kids get to climb on and talk to the people who run them. And a library assistant from the children's department came up to me and said, Cynthia, I love this idea. Can I know a lot of people in the community, can I reach out and make this happen? I was like, knock yourself out. And sure enough, she recruited a number of staff members. She knew everybody in town. She knew people in DPW. She knew people who worked at the hospital. And it went for many years. Obviously, in the pandemic, this does not happen, but it went for like 12 years that she ran this every year during Fire Prevention Week, because she loved doing it. And she had it all down. She knew the people. She would harass them until they'd bring the fire truck. The FMBA was cooking hot dogs for the kids. So, I mean, that was a prime example of letting somebody who wants to be engaged and try something do it. Everyone from maintenance to supervising librarians count, and everybody contributes to the organization. And I have always involved all the staff in any kind of decisions. So often I see in a lot of libraries that somehow maintenance or whatever, part-timers or pages don't get involved and are not, and I started as a page, and it was because of my involvement that I, you know, picked this as a career path. Leading by example, I think that goes without saying. I mean, you know, people are going to look to you for how they should behave. So, next slide, please. Top complaints. Micromanagement. So hard to stay out of some people's business sometimes when you know a better way to do it. Sometimes you just have to, even though it would be easier and faster if you did it yourself or you knew it could be done or whatever, you have to step back. And that is the hardest thing for me to do and hard for many of us. Sometimes you just have to listen to what they're saying and know that they can handle this, or they're going to get there in a different way. It's like doing math proofs that come up to the right answer, but they've gone a whole different way than you. Lack of communication. Wow, communication. Every organization I've been in, every library I've been in, every association, and I'm involved in some nonprofits in Patterson, everybody talks about lack of communication everywhere you go. So, I mean, maybe humans just shouldn't communicate. I mean, this is an issue. You know, you talk to a group, you can talk to individuals, you can send group emails, you can do individual emails, you can do paper. Oh, there's just so many ways. But people have to be receptive to what you're communicating at the time you're communicating it. And that's the key. If anybody figures out how to do that, please let me know, because then, you know, we'll market it, we'll trademark it or market it and make $1 million. I have had, in Patterson, I had a period of time because it was so dysfunctional for so long. And it's not that, now it's barely functional. It's not like exemplary. You know, we worked a long way to get to that. And I would write a physical memo, I would send an email, and I would repeat the same information at a staff meeting. And I would find that unless I said it to somebody, they were unaware of it. And it seems like a waste of my time, but you have to figure out the way people are receiving information and when they're open to hearing it and when they're open to implementing it. That's your job as a director. Fostering divisiveness. I think one of the key areas that people unknowingly foster divisiveness in libraries is between professional staff and support staff. And, you know, somehow give special considerations to professional staff that the support staff resent, whether it's additional, you know, attending conferences and meetings or, you know, additional time off so you can go to whatever. You have to be aware of the fact that everybody is an important piece of your organization. And if you didn't have the support staff, your professionals are kind of pointless. Abusiveness, I don't even want to talk about, because I can't imagine why somebody would be abusive to somebody, but I guess these things happen. Failure to listen. As I said, sometimes I have to learn to shut up and listen to people, but I've taught myself to do so. It's important to hear what they have to say. Avoiding conflict, everybody wants to avoid conflict, but you know, you just can't do that all the time. You have to address things as they're occurring or shortly thereafter. And taking credit for others' work. Okay, next one, please. Interpersonal conflict, key steps. I think I know what I'm talking about here, but you know, some of this I learned a while. So you have to maintain objectivity. And it's something we all learn over time. It is hard for me. I mean, there are trusted people in any organization that I work with in which I close the door and roll my eyes and say, are they for real? But I cannot leak that in front of them or in front of others. It always helps to have some trusted staff that you can do that with, whether it's your assistant director or admin assistant, whoever it is. You have to give staff members the benefit of the doubt. There have been times, as I said, just rolling my eyes in which staff said, I didn't know that, you know, I couldn't. And this is a really trivial example, but in Patterson, you could not, it was banned in the contract that you could not take a personal day next to a vacation day. Couldn't do it. People would put it down and be called on it, and they were like, oh, I didn't know. Okay, now you know. And I'm writing down that you know, and next time, you do have to establish and follow a policy for progressive discipline. This is not my natural style. My natural style is to say, you know better now, right? You're never going to do that. In Patterson, I developed, and I'm not sure that they're using it now. I believe I shared this with Michelle and Bob at one point. I had a policy for progressive discipline in which and I work with the union to do this. I'm going to talk quickly about a union later because I don't know how many union folks there are. I broke down all various infractions and they were grouped into 4 categories. And if you did this one, you got a verbal warning. If you did this one, you got, and all the way to the end, in which is like immediate suspension when you threaten somebody physically. And I only had to use that once, thankfully. And I broke it down because I said, all right, people are saying that they don't know what the consequence of breaking whatever rule is. So we'll put it down. This is not my style because I prefer people to believe the best of people and that they want to do a good job. But I found that it worked really well because then people understood what the results of bad behavior were. You have to meet with a staff member and his or her supervisor and calmly discuss the situation. I hate those situations in which somebody comes in and says, so-and-so did this, my supervisor did this, and I speak to the supervisor and they say, no, I didn't. You gotta talk to each other. You can't fix something on with people's individual, testimony to you. And a lot of times, people don't want to do that. People, I mean, if you don't want to address confrontation, they certainly don't want to address it. They want you to fix it. You then have to follow up with written documentation saying this is what our conversation was, we've all agreed to do this. This all takes a lot of time because you have to continue monitoring and documenting if needed. It takes a huge amount of time. And you can be resentful of it, but quite frankly, ideally, the result is you resolve something and you're all the better for that. And if it's resolved, you have to acknowledge that to the staff member. You have to say, good job. I appreciate the fact that you've corrected this behavior. You're not going to come in late anymore. We've had this conversation and you're doing much better. Or sometimes a staff member will say, I have difficulty. I have to get my kid to school. Can I change my hours? And sometimes that's possible. Sometimes that's you being the humane manager. Okay, next slide, please. So some of you may be unions, some of you may not be unions. I'm just going to run through this quickly in case in both Patterson and Clifton, I had unions and civil service. So, that was the environment I was accustomed to. So you have to develop a respectful relationship with union officers and shop stewards. Bring them into the conversations about difficult topics, disciplinary actions, budgetary dilemmas in case if it affects staffing before actions are taken. Meet with them regularly, include union representation in any meeting regarding disciplinary action, and thank them for their commitment. I've had situations in which, I guess it was in 2008 when we were doing some furloughing for budgetary reasons in Patterson, and I had a lot of meetings with the union officers, and the option was laying people off or furloughing. We had a certain amount of dollars we had to reach. And I laid it all out to them and I told them what the implications were. And they went back to the staff membership of the union and came back to me and said, we'd rather furlough. We don't want anybody to lose their job. Okay, that's what we do then. But I also had great relationships and I was very lucky in that I had people union presidents who were very committed to the public as well as to their union membership. And I know that isn't unique and I valued that. I would, bounce ideas off the union president before we had a meeting saying, what are we going to do about X? This is an issue. Sometimes she would say, let me talk to them. One time I had 2 maintenance guys who I thought were going to hit each other. And she said, can you step out of the room and let me talk to them? And I was like, sure. Because I don't even know what to do with this. And when I came back in, they were shaking each other's hands and moving ahead. I don't know what she did, but that resolved it and we documented that. All right, next one, please, Bob. If you are civil service, what I can say is thoroughly educate yourself about civil service regulations. Learn who has been in contact with civil service and who your civil service rep is, and review. So I want to say that civil service is now much less punitive than it was at one time. And a lot of people in the state think I'm like a civil service expert, but there are others now as well. So at one point it was all about testing. Now it isn't. It's just navigating the system. I do recommend reviewing civil service regulations with staff at a meeting, perhaps annually, because there are different requirements between titles. They don't understand that, like what a library assistant versus a librarian is. But the difficulty is really ensuring that staff understand there's a fairly rigid structure in terms of the titles and job duties as defined by civil service. So it's helpful to educate the staff as well as the board regarding these regulations. Next one, please. Working with boards. So should review statutes with the board and encourage them to establish a personnel committee if one does not already exist. If I had to bring disciplinary action to the board, it goes much more smoothly if I bring it to the personnel committee, discuss all the details of the situation, and move forward. And I'm because otherwise the conversation at a board meeting can become wide-ranging and sort of out of control, depending on your board. Some boards are not like that, but I've had that happen. So I work through a personnel committee on a regular basis. Reinforce that the board hires a director and the director recommends all other staff for her, that they inform the board, this is who we're hiring. There are some boards who will want to be more involved, particularly for some key positions. And I'm not just talking about hiring a page, but you have a head of adult services and they want to know, and they realize it's a key position and they want to know who you're hiring. That you can work that through in the personnel committee. You can say, here are the resumes I've had. I want to tell you this is why I'm selecting so-and-so. These are their criteria. And I think they're going to be a great asset to the library and they're starting next Monday. You should encourage the board to establish a policy that clarifies that communication between the board and the staff is conducted through the director. And I'm sure some of you right now are rolling your eyes because you're either in these situations in which the board is an active member of the community, comes in the library all the time, has established relationships with staff, and things go on. This is hard, but I think that, and there's some recommendations on the trustees page on the state library website about doing this. And, I'm going to say reach out to me if you need some additional assistance, but also the state library can help you. Stress that any discussion of staff at a board meeting must be legally compliant and requires a Rice notice. I have heard, granted it was in the long past, of a library that did not Rice somebody and then fired them at a meeting. That then had the board, the director sign a blank civil service form, it was a civil service library, without anything filled in and filled it out after. That's so illegal. And it's only because people were ignorant of what their protections were that they weren't sued. You don't want to be involved. Next one, please. So some random thoughts. Your role has changed dramatically. You're no longer the person who gets things done. Sorry, folks. You make it possible for others to get things done. So they're either coming to you for time, for money, somebody bounce the ideas off of. They're coming to you to solve the problems. You are no longer saying, you know what, I think a great idea for a program is X. Delegating can be difficult. Even in a small library, you're delegating something. But it's critical to move the library forward and to gain the trust of staff. People have to understand that you trust them too, and they value if they can do a good job and show you that they're capable of doing that. Not every crisis that is brought to you truly requires your intervention. You have to learn how to figure out when you have to act. You know, one situation in which the staff came to the director with every little issue, not even going to their supervisor in between, went straight to the director for every little issue. And that director felt that she had to fix everything. That does not mentor anybody, that does not help anybody grow in their position, and that just stresses out the director. Project confidence even when you don't feel it. I've developed that over the years. So sometimes I have no idea what I'm doing, but everybody thinks I do. People will believe that you can handle things. So I had to learn to say, for example, we talked about everybody bring everything to you. I had to learn to say, I can't talk to you right now. If you can come back at 2 o'clock, I'll have some time, okay? And if it's truly important, they will. I mean, I've had people come to me with all kinds of crazy stuff you know, even like, can I change my lunch hour? That's not for me to decide if you can change your lunch hour. Your supervisor gets to say, can you change your lunch hour? I didn't say it to them in that way. So you can see I have that little edge. And I've thoroughly enjoyed everything I'm doing. I don't know how I end up talking about personnel management. Thank you, Michelle, for all of your kind words. But I hope you got something from this. I see there's a few questions, and let's see what they are. Maybe I can answer them. Maybe Michelle can. I'm done, Bob.
Thanks, Cindy.
Okay.
You did a great job. That's why I asked you to do it.
You
All right, I gotta
Well,
move things.
you know,
all over
and
the
there are
place.
a few questions, but you know, one of the things I think about with you is that I'm trying to turn my video on, is that you have you've had experience with civil service and union employees, which doesn't always happen, and we do get a lot of questions about that, and so that's why
Am
I
I
think
still on, or do you hear me?
yeah, you're on.
Okay. All right. I don't know. I lost everybody. All right. So
You're right.
I'm listening.
Did you hear what I said? Just said?
Yes,
or
I
not?
did.
Oh,
Yes, I
yeah.
did.
So, you know, that's a very important
Thank you.
element, you know, in what you discuss. And I also want to ask you, you had mentioned that back at Patterson, you had the progressive discipline.
Yes.
Did you have templates for that? Or, I mean, I'm just wondering if that's something that is shareable.
I'll have to find it. Isn't that terrible? But I shared it. I can probably track that down. Because some of it is easily adaptable. It's like, you know, don't be late. You know,
Yeah.
if you're late X number. If you abuse this, if you say that.
That might be good for our website. I don't think I have anything like that. We can take a look at it and maybe if there's anything we need to change or,
Sure.
you know, get your, or, you know, I don't think I have anything generic like that that shows like a progressive.
It's kind of chatty, but that's okay.
Well, that, you know, yeah.
Don't be late. If you're late all the time, the burden falls on the rest of the staff. Like I give some justifications. It's not just lateness. This happened.
Yeah, and I think you made a lot of good points, but a couple of things. One is that the micromanaging piece, and you know, I've had managers that it's you know, you talked about like you want to do everything. You know, managers want to do everything, but I've had managers that literally practically stood over you.
Yeah, so have I.
To make sure that you were working every minute of the day, that you were in your chair at this certain time.
Right.
And it literally is so stressful to work like that.
Right.
I remember being sick to my stomach over it. And you know, the whole department was treated that way. And the only thing the manager did was do that all day long to you. Did you make that phone call? Make sure you make that phone call. Make sure you tell so-and-so to do whatever. And it was terrible. It was a, you know, terrible situation. And how I became a library director, it was quite by accident. I had my background in art and art history, and they used to use the library across the street all the time for me in my little town. And I was home with young children at the time, and I got to know the director very well, not all the staff. And so one day the director said to me, "Do you want a job?" Because I had always worked in the art field, and then I stayed home for a couple of years with my kids. And I said, yeah, I thought about just doing a little job while I was home with the kids, like checking in and checking out the books. She said, no, as the library director. And so I became the library director because I had an art collection and my background was in art, and I had never worked in a library before. So yeah, so everybody has a different story.
Trial by fire, Michelle.
Yeah, really. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Bob for the questions.
All right, so we got a few. Linda McFadden asks, I have a staff member who won't clean books or areas because she doesn't like the smell of the cleaner. Other staff is getting upset because they have to do her job. Because of COVID, this has become a huge issue. Any suggestions?
If I had to deal with this, and this may not, you may have done this already, Linda, and it may not be helpful to you. I would offer some alternatives, meaning, so I would talk with her about, okay, so what, is there a cleaner that you're comfortable with? You can just use the cleaner that you like. We will buy it for you so that you can do a share, but you understand that while you may not like the smell of it, it is alienating you from the rest of the staff. I can't believe that she wouldn't be aware of that, but it's possible. Some people are, very unaware of everything that's happening outside of themselves and feel very justified. People who feel powerless will draw a line in the sand for situations like this. So some of that is having just a frank conversation, not a confrontational conversation, but saying, I can't say what's going on here, but saying, I understand your feeling, but you understand that we all have to help each other out here. Is there a cleaner that you would accept as a good alternative? Because I'll buy you a bottle of that and move on to try to resolve this. And it is, to a certain extent, is kind of a passive-aggressive approach to saying that you don't want to take the responsibility of this. I'm talking about the staff member. But in some ways, you have to call her on it. And it is very difficult. And by the way, and I encourage all of you, my email is on the front of the slides. Do they get the slides, Bob? They get a link to the slides, right?
I got to put them up on our website and then email them out.
But I mean, feel free to email me if you want some additional, I don't know if I'm helpful, but if you think I can be helpful, feel free to email me for follow-up questions on that.
I have an idea too about the cleaner thing. So I'm going to share my screen. I am not advocating where this is coming from, but this is from Home Depot. I do a lot of woodworking and painting with volatile chemicals and things like that. And something like this will completely block.
There you go.
Fumes and things like that. I use like enamel paints, and
there you go.
They're very, very toxic smelling. When I wear this, I don't smell it at all. So it's a lot, but might work.
I like the idea of saying, all right, here's the alternative. You can wear this.
Yep.
It may not mind the smell so much anymore.
It's not just saying you don't have to do it. Saying, all right, you want to wear this mask, this gas mask, or would you like? Is there another cleaning product that you could use?
Yeah, and then you're also look like you're taking care of their health as well. You're caring about what's going into their body and things like that, and protecting them from that. So, all right, next question from anonymous attendee. Anonymous attendee asks, how do you manage a staff member who has a hard time working independently or making decisions on their own? They feel the need to share every step of their work with other staff, which sucks up a lot of time and creates frustration with colleagues.
This is going to require ongoing attention. Sorry, but there's no other way around it. It requires meeting with them to gently approach this saying, I understand that you're sharing a lot of information, but that means that other people can't do their jobs. Is there some additional feedback you would like, either from your supervisor or me? I mean, it requires a lot of follow-up. It requires a meeting that they may be upset about afterward. But then, assuring them that, you're valuing what they're doing, but by talking about their work all the time, they're affecting what other people do. And is there another option for this? Is there another way we can put this, that we can address this? Because, you see, a lot of my answers are like offering alternatives, because sometimes people haven't thought of any other way. Some people could be talking to themselves and unaware, like you, obviously I always give people the benefit of the doubt, but they can be talking to themselves and be unaware of the fact that they're talking to themselves. So I think if you could isolate that issue by talking with them about it and making them aware about it, but going into it, being aware of the fact that it may be upsetting for them, for you to say, stop talking to other people. I'm not going to say that. See that? I'm resorting to my behind closed doors voice. But you have to address it, and you have to address it as gently and humanely as possible, but you do have to address it if it's affecting the workflow.
Sorry, I had to mute myself. My dogs think the male person is invading our home. Okay. El Khani, which I don't know who that is, asks, if some staff are civil service and some newer staff members are not, would reaching out to civil services representatives jeopardize their job? I'm talking about a library assistant position.
I don't think that you can have a hybrid.
Yeah, I don't think so
Some
either.
civil service and not civil service. It's possible that somebody didn't put them in the civil service system.
Yeah.
But if your municipality adopted a resolution, God knows however many years ago, decades ago, to become a civil service community, I don't know, and a lot of people want to get out, but I don't know of any municipalities managed to get out of civil service. So you might say
if you're civil service community, then the library is civil service as well.
Yes, yes.
The whole
A lot of times we're just folded in. I do know of one housing authority that managed to get out of civil service, but that's not a library. So, so I have some real doubts. I don't know if you want to
contact civil service. I would.
Even
yeah, I would
management,
contact civil service for sure, but I don't think it's possible to be a hybrid.
would the director be civil service in that case
Yes.
too?
Oh, wait,
Okay.
they followed up and said that's the case. They were not entered. So they need to be entered.
Oh, yes, call them, they'll do it. Yes, call them for help. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
call them for help. They'll help you enter it. Usually they're not like immediately responsive, but they want to make sure that everybody gets into the CAMP system, which is CAMPS. So yes, take care of that as soon as you can.
Definitely. All right. Okay. So anonymous attendee asks, I have an older employee, excuse me, who is increasingly unable to do her tasks without assistance from other staff members. We already make many accommodations for her. She's eager to come to work and even asks for more hours, but there isn't much work I can reasonably assign to her. How would you handle this scenario?
These are good ones. This is a very, very difficult and awkward conversation to have. And you have to have a conversation with this individual. Ideally, I would have it initially just with the individual and try to gauge whether what you're discussing with the person is actually being retained, because you don't know if it's memory issues, you don't know if it's, physical limitations. I mean, maybe you know, but I don't know in my projected. And you actually have to say it. And you actually have to say, we've noticed that it's more and more difficult for you to get your work done. What are our alternatives here? I did have somebody who did have some memory issues. and I broke every rule and invited them to bring a family member into the meeting. You know, that is not, that I broke every rule because I felt it was important for them to feel that they had an ally present when I had a conversation with them. And that actually worked out pretty well because the staff member, the family member was aware of it and was able to have some conversations and advise them. But that's just sheer luck. I mean, I will acknowledge I've had other times which I had an incompetent person that I terminated, and she was in her 30s and her mother kept calling me up and yelling at me on the phone and tell me why you're doing this. I'm like, your daughter's in her 30s. So what I'm saying is that it is, my heart goes out to you. It's a very, very difficult conversation to have with somebody. Almost as difficult as if, you know, you're just addressing, probably more difficult than if you're just addressing somebody who's incompetent, you know, on a regular basis. And you have to, you know, some libraries have tried to, library directors have tried to manipulate this by, you know, cutting somebody's hours until like they're only working 3 hours a week so that they have a minimal effect on the rest of the staff and hopefully it'll occur to them. So, you know, you either go that route, sort of the coward's route, which I am not faulting anybody with doing because sometimes it's very, very difficult, particularly if you have a small staff, or the other option is to have a very difficult conversation and say, you notice that you're not able to do your work. What are we going to do about it?
Yep.
Sorry, it's the best I can do.
All right, another anonymous attendee, or maybe the same one, who knows? I have a full-time staff member who has told us she can't work without earphones. She has anxiety. How might we respond?
Well, you know, in that case, if you have a library attorney, I have to say to you that I would contact them to determine if the headphones, if that is reasonable accommodation. You can say to her, I'm going to, you know, I'm so sorry because we can't have headphones. I need documentation.
Yeah, doctor's note.
Yeah, that you have a condition that's going to require some sort of accommodations, reasonable accommodations. So if you could provide me with that, then we can be happy to make an accommodation, which may be headphones, whatever. But first you have to start with having that difficult conversation about, you say you're having anxiety, I need documentation. Help me help you.
Mm-hmm.
I need documentation that shows that this is necessary. And then we can go to step from there. But then if you have a library attorney, the plus is that you can go to the library attorney for advice on what reasonable accommodations might be considered to be. Somebody might say, I don't want to work at a public desk, I have anxiety. And you're like, well, this is not the job for you. But I would start there with another. All of you have the difficult conversations, my God.
Yeah. But it's good that they're asking you. I mean, you're definitely the one that asked. You have the experience.
I don't know. Anyway.
I mean, I've never been a director and don't intend to. And Michelle hasn't been.
Michelle has
in a while, but she was. So anyway.
Not going back.
What's that?
Not going back.
No.
It's
Okay.
so difficult.
So another question from an anonymous attendee. What do you do about a staff member who is passive aggressive in her dealings with other staff? It's very subtle, so it's hard to document. And when I've called her on certain things she's done, there is always a reason why, or she somehow puts the situation back on me, i.e. she's not going to send out emails anymore unless she runs them past me first.
You know,
There's another tough one.
many of us are passive aggressive in many ways in our lives to manipulate. If they want to, you know, if people don't want to do something, they'll say, well, you know, I can't do it without you giving the okay. I'm trying to think of how I would handle this, quite frankly. I would probably roll my eyes and then say, I don't want, no, you're not going to run the emails by me. You're going to send them and document that. You know, you have to decide if you're drawing the line in the sand, and I hate to say it in that way, but, you know, if this seems to be not just a continuing issue, but an escalating issue, in which she says she's not going to do something until this, she's putting the conditions on you, I recommend you don't let that happen. I think that you have to call her on that and say, no, you're going to send the emails out, and I'm documenting the fact that I'm telling you you're going to send the emails out, and I appreciate your attention. You do a good job. Remember, always, praise people at the end of your tirade. You do a good job, and I trust that you can do it. And from going forward, just let me know when you have sent them out, after you've sent them out, and we'll go on from there. But you're going to have to be vigilant. It's going to have to be regular. You're going to have to check in regularly that this is moving forward. And I understand, many years ago, I had a staff member who was so passive aggressive, I can't even describe it. And we actually sent, because he made some references to some challenges that he may have, developmental challenges he may have, I asked him if he would agree to a psychiatric evaluation. I mean, I asked him, would you, with the union president, would you agree to this so that we could determine what your issues are and we could try to work with them? It cost me a lot, it cost the library, not me personally, a lot of money to have a psychiatric evaluation. And do you know what the result was? The psychiatrist gave me a report that said there are no issues that prevent him from doing his job. He has a problem with authority. Great. Now what do I do? But I called him on it. I said, look, there's no issues developmentally. It took a lot of money and a lot of time to resolve that. He did get better. He was never a great employee. But a problem with authority, I could have told him that. But I had a psychiatrist. So my whole point is that you're going to have to say, no, I'm sorry, this is your job, and you're going to do your job, and after.
Yep.
Sorry, I went off on a tangent there.
No, that's all right. So you had referenced in one of the answers prior to this, which I can't find the exact question for, you said something about taking the coward's way out or something like that. And some anonymous attendee says, in taking the coward's way out, am I allowed to shorten a part-time employee's hours?
I don't know your individual library, obviously, etc. But it's possible, but you're going to have to be able to justify it to them, meaning, well, we don't need, you can't then give hours to somebody else. If you're shortening hours, you're probably going to go back and shorten and say, we don't need these many hours right now. We're not going to say we're taking, if they come and say, for example, if you want more people to work evenings and this person has only worked mornings, you could take hours from them in the morning and say, I need more people to work evenings. So unless you want to work evenings, I'm taking these hours. If you truly, and I don't know the library in this situation, but sometimes you can bite the bullet and say, you know what, I'm going to lose 6 hours and reduce them to 3, for example, and we're just going to bite the bullet and deal with this until they get fed up and leave. So it's possible if you're a union, but it's possible to do this, but you have to be able to justify it. And you have to be able to answer them when they say, why not? Why are you doing this? It is the coward's way out, ultimately, and saying, well, you can't work the hours we need, or we don't have the same demand, or we have, so-and-so is picking up this work and I don't have work for you. So be prepared with that answer.
Yeah, here's another add-on question from me. Would the director have to go to the board to get approval for this? And if so, does the person then have to be riced because that discussion would inevitably involve them getting less money?
If somebody goes to the board with this, their board is micromanaging, in my opinion. Okay, as long as the director is working within the personnel budget and is managing everything, I would never go to the board with this. Mm-hmm. However, there are, as I talked about, there are small libraries in particular with board members who are in all the time, and they would say, where's Allison? She's always here on Tuesday mornings. Why isn't she here now? And so you're going to have to be prepared with your good answer. Whether Allison can't work the hours we want, we don't have sufficient work for her, whatever. You're going to have to be prepared, whatever good reason, even if you're making up that good reason.
And I have an add-on onto that too. What do you do when, you know, you have to make kind of accommodations for someone like we're talking about this person who never was really a good employee anyway, no matter what you did. And then you have other employees who are doing a great job, but, you know, the morale suffers because they see someone, you know, getting away with slacking off for what other reason. Now, I think that pretty much people can tell the difference between someone who genuinely has an issue and may need a real accommodation and those that are just sort of taking advantage of the situation. But I've seen it myself, you know, it leads to a lot of resentment that, hey, how come this one's getting away with slacking off and we can't? So what do you do in a situation like that? They come and complain to you too.
There's two approaches that I take. One of them, you know, there are times in which a director, particularly in a little bit larger library, remember I've worked in libraries that were a little larger and had branches so that I wasn't watching everything. I couldn't see everything all the time. And some of that is making sure that your good employees know that you value them. So to a certain extent, like they can be resentful if they feel they're being ignored while this person's getting away with stuff. But if, you know, I would give acknowledgement and thanks to the people who are managing stuff and doing the job and doing a good job. In Patterson, the tiny little branches, there's only a couple of people, there's no librarians there. And I would, you know, reach out and say, you know, I want to thank you guys because I know I don't have to worry about this branch. I know you guys are handling it and that you handle it every day. And I don't have to think, you know, unless there's an issue, I don't have to say, gee, I hope they opened on time or whatever. I did have a situation in which a whole department was objecting to an employee and they came to me with their complaints. And I was very honest with them and I said, I don't see this because this isn't something that I am in every day. So I know where that's coming from.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
I know. Not me, I don't have a dog here in the office. So I hate to say this, I need you guys to document it. And if you document it, and come to me with it, then we'll sit down with this employee and address this. So we slowly tweaked it. It took a long, long time. Like we were addressing one particular behavior or lack thereof at a time. And, but I got to give them credit. They stepped up. And I said, this is the kind of things that I need you to provide to me. Because as far as I can tell, he shows up on time every day. He does basically what he's supposed to do and he goes home. And you can fault me for that or his supervisor for not addressing it. But if the whole department, you know, rises up with the supervisor, then we can really address it. It's very uncomfortable. But the library is better for it when you're done with that.
Okay. Hold on a second. Okay.
Isn't it almost time for me to be done?
It is. We have a bunch of other questions though. We have like 4 more questions. So let's see. Let's do. Okay, let's do 2 more. We're on year 2 of no contract. The union members want to settle on a contract. However, the union rep isn't that great to work with and won't return the shop steward's calls. Any advice?
If you haven't already, you have to sit down with the shop steward and say, how do we make this happen? Like you have to be on the side of the shop steward because I'm sure you want this union contract settled too. Nobody likes to go for years and years and years and try to hold back money that you're then going to have to pay out in retroactive pay. Nobody wants that. Staff don't want it. You don't want it. It's a pain in the neck. So you have to sit down with the shop steward. At some point, you have to advise the shop steward to go over the union rep's head. There's always an office somewhere. If it's AFSCME or wherever, CWA, whatever, and saying, we're frustrated as hell, we're trying to get this union. And you know, the union rep's going to be resentful and mad and angry and yell and everything else. The whole point is that you got to, it's sort of like going over, when people go over the heads of a supervisor and come to the director. It's like you're going over somebody to try to get something done. Or you call the union rep, and that'll shock the heck out of them, because it's like, why is the director calling the union rep saying, you know, I want this contract settled as much as the staff. What do we have to do to make that happen? Because this is unsustainable as it is right now. They may be shocked to get a call from me. I have been involved to that extent, but I had really good representation in the library union. But sometimes, as I said, going above and beyond was very frustrating for them. And if I can help to get things done, because I wanted it settled too.
Okay, so we have a few more questions. The whole thing goes until 1 o'clock. Michelle had like a wrap up time for like the last 25 minutes. Okay. But if do you have to go, or Cindy?
No, I just figured people are tired of hearing me.
No. That's impossible.
Oh, you say that. You don't know what they're thinking back in their offices.
I think they love and adore you, and value your advice very much. Okay.
Cindy, there's not too many people that know how to answer these kind of questions. So.
Seriously, this is not false modesty. I just want to.
I know. Okay. If you want to create a new position with more responsibility, but need to take the hours from current hours, how do you do it? Can you promote someone to do it, or do you have to wait for someone to leave?
It depends on how much energy and chutzpah you have. You know, if you want to create a new position, I think first you design something. You know, you start with the design, like building a building. You start with the design. I want somebody, this is the job description. I've done my research. I think the benefits could be this. I think the benefits could be that. If you have somebody in place that you think can grow into that, that's the best case scenario. Because people like to know that they can move up in an organization, that their skills are acknowledged, and that they can really, you know, make a difference. If you don't have somebody you can promote into that, then don't do it until you have a vacancy or a ton more money and can create a new position. You're not going to be able to just take hours. I mean, if it's a part-time position, you could take a little hours here, take a few hours here, take some hours here, maybe. But if you're talking about creating, like, you know,
a new full-time position,
then you have to wait. And it's painful to wait, but you know, at the end, you're going to get that done. If you're creating a part-time position, I don't know. I'm trying to make something up here. You just want to create a storyteller position. I know it's ridiculous, but you don't want to be a children's librarian. You just want to hire somebody as a storyteller. It's going to be part-time. You might take hours from this person and that person. And if they see that, if the rest of the staff sees the value of having somebody who's just so creative and just tells stories, you have to decide, you have to weigh the risks versus the benefits and see how much time psychic energy you could put into it while you're trying to do something that's really unique and innovative. I hope that helps. I don't know.
No, sounds good to me. Okay. Let's see. Do you have to advertise a new position? We do have someone in mind. I think that was the same person. They're anonymous, so I don't know.
It depends on, I mean, if you're a union shop, you absolutely have to do that. If you're a civil service shop, you absolutely have to do that. I would recommend you do it in any case. And that's just being transparent about what you're doing.
Okay. They keep asking more questions. More questions keep coming in. What steps would you take to prepare for a key team member's retirement? The person is a supervisor who is key to the library's operations.
Oh. That actually happened here. And I'm not just talking about with the director. There was a key person who retired. Obviously, you try to have them document everything they have done and move it ahead. But it was the head of information services that retired here in Parsippany quite suddenly when they shut down for COVID, and she decided that she didn't want to come back. And that's not an issue. That's nothing against her. I don't blame her. I mean, she was older and she's like, you know what? It's time for me to retire. I'm not sure any preparation was done. And staff have come to me and said, and this is relating, why don't you fill that position? And I keep saying, I'm not going to fill that position. We're hiring a new director. A new director might want to reorganize.
Mm-hmm.
A person may not still have, so you have to see what they're doing and you have to document what they're doing. And then you have to look critically to say, she maybe, if she oversaw ILL, somebody else could oversee ILL. You have to look critically at what this person did, and the key factors that are of most greatest importance to you as a director and to the library as a whole, and say, is that retained there, or are there other things that can be picked up? There are things that are not being addressed because of this vacancy. I know that. Other staff knows that. But I think that's okay. And so what I'm saying is that you've got to, documenting, and, I walked into here and Jane Beeline, who retired, handed me all these documents, and I have them here for the next director. But some of that is you learn as you go. So you have to decide if that position is going to be exactly the same, or if you're going to take advantage of somebody's retirement and have some modification. And then you have to look hard at the people who are there to decide if you're going to, if you might potentially want to offer it as a promotion. Because I'm sure some of them want it. There's always some people who don't want it. It's like, I don't want any more responsibility. But, you have to look hard at that. I don't know if that answered that question, but best I can do.
Okay. All right. I just want to say all the attendees are posting in the chat and saying they agree with me about how valuable you are. So it's not just me.
Very kind. Thank you.
Yeah. How much is enough documentation? When you talk about like documenting, I think like employee interactions and things like that.
Are you talking about if you're doing disciplinary action? Is that what we're talking about?
It's vague. All the person asks is how much is enough documentation? Like how?
If you're going to terminate, it's a lot. You are going to, if your goal is to get rid of this person, you're going to have to meet with them regularly. And if their supervisors around or union or whatever is going to have to be with it, you send a memo following up, you gather documentation saying this is what you've done that has been objectionable or illegal or violating procedure or whatever. Illegal is easy, that's separate, sorry. And you're going to have that documentation provided to them, do a memo after saying this is what we discussed, and if you don't correct by X date, then we're going to meet again. And it's going to have to go on and on, because you can't just terminate. You're exposing the library to a lawsuit. When I became a library director, I was very, very young. I didn't know what I was doing, and learned a lot along the way. And I was targeting a particular librarian who had been my colleague. Now I'm her boss. And she was so horrible that I made it my personal goal to run her out of the library. Like, that was one of the things that I wanted to do, is to get rid of her. So I started meeting with her and documenting all of these things that she was doing as objectionable. And I finally was able to suspend her, which shocked her, because then she went to the board and the board supported me in that suspension. And then ultimately she left before I could fire her. because she knew the writing was on the wall. I would call her in and she'd be sweating. I didn't know I had this in me, but apparently I do have the ability to make people nervous. And, but that's when I only get upset or angry or really determined when I feel the organization is being threatened. It's not me. It's not if somebody else on her staff, the staff is saying she shouldn't be getting away with this. Is if I feel her behavior is threatening the organization, then you have to start doing the whole document. It takes so much time. And you can only hope that people leave under their own, like quit and say, I don't need this and quit because, so documentation more than a book. That's protect yourself. That's why you're documenting.
All right, one last question. This is it. There is a staff member I just can't stand. She cries, shouts, defends, blames. Nothing is ever her fault and always mine. I feel fake being nice to her and just try to avoid her. How do I improve myself to handle this situation better?
Well, you're not improving yourself. You're, let's face facts. Some of that is talking with her and saying, obviously we don't get along. Sometimes you have to call it. Sometimes you have to call it and you have to say, I find myself resenting when you're crying and blaming me for everything. How did we get here? How do we fix it? I mean, sometimes you have to put the burden on them as well. It's not just you. It's also talking with somebody and saying, I find this behavior is so upsetting to me and so objectionable to me in a workplace that I think we have to find a way to address this. And if you're going to tell me you don't notice this, I'm not sure what to do because I'm going to have to start documenting every time you blame me and it's not my fault. Every time you find something objectionable, every time you observe, I'm just going to have to start documenting it and so then we can talk about it again. You don't want to threaten her. I mean, it's a veiled threat. But at some point you have to call her on it. But some people get away with acting up because nobody ever calls them on it. And
They just put an addendum. She says she has PTSD. Again, get a doctor's note.
Yes, exactly. Saying, I acknowledge the fact that you may have I personally do, but to protect you, I need documentation that this is the case. Yep. She may have PTSD.
Yep. Right
now, I've read that a lot of people who are going through this pandemic with PTSD. So I'm not, or self-diagnosing as having PTSD.
Yeah.
But that's very true.
Yes, I think that you have to ask her for documentation relating to that.
Well, thanks, Cindy.
Thank
I think that, what's interesting is while you were answering all these questions, and I feel bad that, it's you alone up there doing it, but it reminds me that Pat Pavlak and Pat Tulity, who were here last week for the trustees, were on a program they called Trustees Uncensored, where the trustees can just ask, what we say in this room stays in this room, and they just can ask these kinds of questions. And perhaps it might be of benefit for the library directors if we do the directors uncensored and have you, and we would need to identify a couple of other library directors who had, a great deal of expertise in this area, because we really do need, I was a library director, like I said, thrown into it. I really needed answers to these questions.
Yeah.
And so maybe we should plan, maybe we should think of a couple more people for a panel and run a, staff questions, directors uncensored, something like that. So if you think that would be a good idea, I would be really interested in that. Maybe on one of our monthly directors check-ins, might be good. But, really, people could probably keep it talking all afternoon. I remember one NJLA conference where they were having civil service come and talk.
Yeah.
And it wasn't in a really big room, but it wasn't in one of the tiniest rooms either. And it was overflowing out into the hallway where people were trying to look over people's heads just to try to sort some things out. And oh, Bob, thanks for that pop up for being able to ask that.
Yeah, I
Over there.
think that I mean, we could work. I'm sorry. I was just kind of, while I was putting that up, I was thinking it would be very easy to, because when people put their questions in the Q&A, they can check to be anonymous. So that's why there was a ton of anonymous attendees.
Yeah.
Right.
So with this, they could do that. Also, since it would be uncensored and everything would stay there, we wouldn't record it. We would just have it.
Right.
It would just live here, and that's it. And
Right.
people would have to get
Right.
their
That'd be
answers to their
great.
questions here, and then that would be it. So they could be truly open and honest, and
Right.
and not that they wouldn't be honest, but you know what I mean.
Right. So, okay, so we'll work on that. And Cindy, I want to thank you so much for joining us
you.
today
Thank you. very
with
much.
all of your insights.
I do want to encourage, and I mean that's a sincere offer, that if you want to follow up with a question or follow up and let me know how some advice I gave you backfired, feel free to email me.
Thanks, Cindy. Have a great rest of your day. And if everyone could just hang on there for a minute, who is still in attendance. I'm not sure how many people are, I'm sure you're all still there.
About
But
30 so.
I want to thank you all for being with us for these last 2 days, well, these last 2 Wednesdays, I should say, for our programs. This year we did it a little bit differently. This is usually offered only to new trustees, but thanks to Zoom and the Zoom, Loom in the Zoom room, we had plenty of room for experienced directors. And we thought, well, why not? This is general information that we could open up and have enough people, plenty of room for people to join. So if, as a last favor to us, you could put in the chat, did you find this helpful? Was it long enough? Was it too long? Just a general thoughts. Is there a topic that we didn't cover? Basic topic. Remember, these are all, these are all like sort of nuts and bolts topics that we need new directors to cover. But, we want to make this as good for you as we can. And it has already been suggested, since we don't know when we're going to be resuming any kind of in-person forums or conferences. We used to do an experienced directors conference. That would be 1 year, and then we did the trustee institute next year, and then we would switch off. But I don't know if that's I don't know how that's going to be happening, and I don't know what the future will bring. And, so you all have my email. I'm interested to know if you're a new director, were you overwhelmed? Of course it's overwhelming, but the fact that experienced directors were in here, do you feel like it was okay? Did you still need some more information just for new directors? Or, do you think this format worked really well for every director to join? And was there a topic we didn't cover that you wanted to see? Now, without making it into 2 days of full programs, which, we're tired of sitting as it is, we always do library law, we always do purchasing, we always do working with trustees, we always do strategic planning, budgeting, and working with your staff. So that's 6 topics that are kind of like the primo or the primo topics that we want to cover for directors. But, we do it longer, we could do whatever, we do it based on your needs. So you should feel free to contact me and let me know, since I do the general planning for all this, what would be most helpful to you, whether you're a new director or experienced director. And again, Bob, thank you for being our Zoom man.
Kathy started to call me Dr. Zoom.
Dr. Zoom.
About that. It's kind of like Dr. Doom. So that's.
I think you'd rather be Dr. Doom, but at any rate, thanks for all your backup and and helping everybody, because we wouldn't be able to do it without you. And I want to thank everybody for hanging in there with us. We had a great attendance rate really for the 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And everybody hung in there pretty much till the end. So that's saying something. And so I guess, Bob, maybe leave the comments open for a couple of minutes while people get in there, some of their final thoughts about the 2 weeks. Normally, if you were with us in person at the State Library, we wouldn't let you out of the door until you filled out an evaluation. So obviously we can't do that now. You would just turn us off whenever you wanted to. But your comments are really very, very much appreciated, so that we can work on what we want to do in the future. So
You can always email us too. Any comments?
Yeah, that's right.
You know, right now.
And don't forget, we are here as consultants. That Bob and I are here, especially for directors and trustees, to answer questions. And so email us. A lot of times what I do is, if it's a sensitive matter or it's going to require me asking a lot of questions, and maybe you asking me a lot of questions, I will just give you my phone number and say, rather than put all this in an email, which sometimes we don't want to do, because it is sensitive, we could talk via phone, and a lot of times I think that's even better, because sometimes I can't tell from the tone of the email really what's up. I may sense that, there's more here than meets the eye. The director is obviously really upset. So let me give a call and see what's really going on. So sometimes that works better. And I don't mind your emailing me and saying, gee, you want to, and I don't want to put my phone number up on the, on the recording, but I would certainly be happy to give it to you, that we can talk, or I'll direct it to the right person. Bob will talk to your phone.
Isn't your desk phone forwarded to your cell phone?
My desk phone is forwarded to my cell phone.
So you call the extension on the State website.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's better to do that than call cell phone directly, because I don't answer the phone unless I know who it is. And if when it rings through from my extension, it says New Jersey State Library, and then I know it's a work call. I kick everybody out of the room, my family out of the room, and take the call.
Yeah. So we've done our own workarounds in the pandemic. So so all right. Thanks again for joining us. I still see some things that are coming in. We really
Somebody
appreciate
asked,
your comments.
is it possible to have a similar training with both directors and trustees together? Anything's possible. We have not done that. We kind of have kept the two groups separate, because they sometimes have separate questions and separate concerns. But that's definitely something that we could think about. I don't know if I want to do that every month. Maybe in the spring, we could do a directors trustees together thing and have a bunch of us on, like the Pat's on and Cindy on and people like that, and kind of merge the two groups. It'll probably be a really long one, because there'll be a lot of questions and a lot of discussion. But yeah, I mean, maybe we'll send out an email, testing the waters for that and seeing if people want it. And if there's a good response to that, then we'll put it together.
We've talked about that over the years, because a lot of other states do their trustee training and director training together, not new directors, but they have a joint conference like that. What had stopped us before was doing it in person and not being able to get a venue that we could afford that would hold everybody, because there were a lot of breakout sessions in the trustee conference. So now that we have Zoom and we can have seating up to 500, that's something we can take a look at again. Yeah. And a lot of other states even have their Friends of the Library join. So it's, directors, trustees, friends. So what would you all think about, something like that too? Because, friends, as, Cindy often talked about micromanaging. We talked about before, the board micromanaging you, or you micromanaging employees. Sometimes the friends, there's a lot of miscommunication with the friends and a lot of friction between the trustees and the friends. And so we could think about, something like that too. if there's anything that I can say that came out that's good about the pandemic, is it really forced us to adopt this virtual world much more than we had done so in the past. And we've begun exploring, and expanding the services that we provide, via Zoom or webcasting, whatever. And so I've been extremely happy with the way that's going. We're getting much bigger attendance on these programs, and we may be able to afford to do more because we can have more people come in at one time rather than these smaller location things. Well, depending on the kinds of speakers you get. So if, these kind of things that we do on a monthly basis, we sort of use each other as references. We have like a rich pool of people to draw from in New Jersey, I think, between, with directors. And so we do that. We have, I think, the library law session with Michael Salerone is just fantastic. But there are national speakers or speakers from other states who bring a bigger perspective if we want to do more of a big keynote type of thing. And that's a kind of, that's the kind of conference that can cost, But we are able now to do more because we don't have to worry about the food and the venue costs and all that kind of stuff. So
Travel, et cetera.
Yeah, travel and all of that. So again, I think everybody's about done with putting some things in the chat box. Bob, will you save the chat? You have it.
Yeah, I can save the chat, and well, it saves it automatically.
Okay, great. So
if anybody has any other questions or comments that they want to email to either of us, please do. I will be, of course, this is being recorded, so I will put this up probably tomorrow. It takes, from the last one, it's a gigantic video file and it takes forever, like hours and hours to render. So I might not get to it tonight. I'll probably get to it tomorrow morning. So
so
it'll be
that
up on our YouTube channel, and I'll send it out on NJ Pub Libs for everybody that wasn't on that can rewatch it.
Okay, great. And so with that, we're going to say goodbye. And thanks again for joining us, and be safe and stay healthy, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
See ya.
Bye.